writing a diary to vent and let Iron Man see it. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1. Every day waiting for Iron Man to be kidnapped. Lin Feng glanced at the giant portrait of Tony Stark between the high-rise buildings and even felt a little incredible in his heart. How could it suddenly become like this? He was originally just an ordinary young man on Earth. After watching Captain Marvel 2, he felt that he had wasted his ticket money. He really took a step back and became more and more angry. So he posted a long article on the internet to criticize the shitty plot of Captain Marvel 2. Then when he woke up, he came to such a Marvel world. In this world, he is a standard third generation Chinese. His ancestors immigrated from the founding of New China. With the efforts of 2 generations, he successfully accumulated a fortune of hundreds of millions of dollars. Although most of it is still real estate, the cash flow is only about tens of millions of dollars. But it is still a third generation rich man. Originally, this should have been a good start. After all, he was just an ordinary middle-class child in his previous life. His family was not poor, but it was definitely not rich. It can only be said that his parents never lacked food and drink for him. Compared with his current wealth, it is far worse. But the question is, where is this? This is the Marvel world. The Hulk and Thor that appeared in the early stage are nothing. Even the super boss Thanos in the first stage only wants to destroy half of the creatures in the universe. It sounds scary, but after the concept of the time variance administration appears, it is a whole timeline that disappears at any time. That is to say, if he is not careful, Lin Feng may be gone without knowing it and be wiped out from the root. When encountering events in superhero movies such as Thor and the Hulk, he can still run fast and stay away from New York City at most, but when faced with a snap of the fingers and half of the universe is gone, or the entire timeline is erased, how can he hide? So although he traveled through time and became a rich third generation in this life, he was not very happy in his heart. The only thing to be thankful for is that those big events that can easily destroy the world will happen many years later. Even the first wave of the plot of Avengers 1 was in 2012. Now it is only 2008, and even the kidnapping that Tony Stark was destined to have has not happened yet. But it will be soon. After Tony Stark is kidnapped, the stock of Stark Industries will plummet. At that time, it will be time to buy at the bottom. In this life, Lin Feng has a large flat in his name and $1 million in cash. This is also a company that his family gave him to train himself and start a business. It is impossible for him to work as a worker. If their family worked honestly, how could they save up hundreds of millions of dollars? Especially after Tony Stark gave up the military industry, the stock price of Stark Industries would plummet. At that time, he could easily buy at a low price and double it several times, or even 10 times. Otherwise, why do people say that Americans like to play with finance? If they honestly build factories and produce, it will take a long time for them to increase from $1 million to $10 million. However, this kind of economy is ultimately bloated. Just look at the extent of the decline of the United States in the future. It is ridiculously fast. However, these have nothing to do with Lin Feng. Anyway, he has money. At most, he can take the money back to China or go to other countries. Moreover, the entire timeline may be erased in the future. There is no point in working hard. Just muddle through. However, in a place that Lin Feng didn't know, in Stark Building, Tony Stark was flipping through the diary in front of him. Lin Feng's diary, Tony Stark's copy. He has flipped through this diary countless times in the past few days. For him, who has never had much patience for things other than scientific research, it is already quite abnormal. Just because of what is written in it, he really cares. May 1st, weather, sunny waiting for the first day of Tony Stark's kidnapping. May 2nd, weather, cloudy waiting for the second day of Tony Stark's kidnapping. May 3rd, weather, sunny. It's the third day since I waited for Tony Stark to be kidnapped. Today I saw Tony Stark in the news. It was like a lifetime ago, as if I saw a young version of Robert Downey Jr. May 4th, weather, sunny. I feel a little uneasy. This damn dangerous world. It would be nice if there was a progress bar. At least I could check the progress of Tony Stark becoming Iron Man. May 5th. Weather, cloudy. The stock of Stark Industries is really a bit outrageous. For an industrial group, it's a bit exaggerated. It can almost be compared with those internet companies. But there's no way. Who lets their helmsman as Tony Stark? Without Tony Stark, Stark Industries is not worthless, but it's normal for it to plummet. But this is a good opportunity. Once the news of Tony Stark's disappearance comes out, you can consider buying it. When he shuts down the weapons department of Stark Industries and the stock collapses, it's a good time to buy it. May 6th. Weather, sunny. I saw the Playboy in the news again. As expected, with his personality, he would feel uncomfortable if he didn't appear in the news for a day. But it was just right to judge whether he was kidnapped in Afghanistan. At present, I have recorded the diary of the past few days. The content of each day's diary is not long, but for Tony Stark, it is undoubtedly a huge shockwave. With his scientific literacy, he naturally doesn't believe in any supernatural things. If it were under normal circumstances, he would probably not even look at such a thing, and would only think that some charlatan who came from nowhere wanted to fool him. He never believed in these unrestrained things. However, this diary fell from the sky and landed directly in front of him, which was another matter. That day, he was in the office, just finished dealing with the company's affairs, and planned to sneak away quietly without telling Pepper to go out and have a date with a cover girl. Who knew that it would appear out of thin air in front of him and fall on his desk? Afterwards, he asked Jarvis to scan the inside and outside of the diary to make sure there were no hidden mechanisms, such as if it was hidden in a secret compartment on the ceiling and then fell down. Everything was normal. What's even more outrageous is that the content of this diary would automatically update at a certain time every day, and sometimes he could see with his own eyes that the font suddenly appeared under his nose. It took a long time to recuperate. The gallbladder was saved, and the other things were over. I will open a book before the new year to find the feeling. I'm back. Please support me during the new book period. Chapter 2, being targeted by Iron Man. He also tried to have Jarvis scan it to see if there was any invisible ink or something that would appear under certain special circumstances or after certain specific times. But in the end, nothing was found. This was just a very normal diary. If there was anything special about it, it was probably that this diary was accidentally discovered by Tony Stark. It was impervious to water and fire, and there was no way to write on it. But after scanning it with the most sophisticated instruments, it was found that it was indeed just an ordinary diary. But could an ordinary diary be put on fire and remain intact? Obviously impossible. So, until here, Tony Stark finally confirmed that he might have encountered something supernatural. So he really wanted to pay attention to the contents recorded in the diary. If there is a 1 in 10,000 possibility, judging from the contents of the diary, is it really possible that he will be kidnapped in the future? Judging from the tone of the diary, this person does not seem to have planned his kidnapping behind the scenes, but seems to know some kind of future, or some kind of superpower. The superpower to predict the future? This kind of superpower is common in Hollywood's cheesy movies, but the general direction is that people cannot change their own destiny, and it will eventually conform to the prophecy. But he just doesn't believe in fate. Mr. Stark, the board of directors just sent an email to ask you to go to Afghanistan next month to show the generals of the Ministry of Defense the missiles that our company is about to sell to them. At this time, Jarvis's voice interrupted his thoughts, but made him alert. Afghanistan? Isn't this the person named Lin Feng mentioned in his diary that he was kidnapped in Afghanistan? But he didn't even know about his trip to Afghanistan because he was used to being a hands-off boss, and most of the administrative matters in the company were entrusted to his uncle Obadiah and Pepper. He was mainly responsible for scientific research, and there were some occasions where the boss had to show up in person. Most of the rest of the time, he was eating, drinking and having fun. For example, the Jericho missile that was about to be sold to the US military was his most recent masterpiece. If it was sold to the US military, the profit could exceed $1 billion at a time, which was worth it for him, the big boss, to go there in person. After all, the US military was rich and powerful, and everyone knew that a thermos cup could sell for tens of thousands of dollars, so why couldn't his Jericho missiles? However, the board of directors had decided to send him to Afghanistan on short notice, but they had not told him before today. After all, he usually ran away from the board of directors meetings whenever he could. Anyway, Uncle Abadia and Pepper were watching him. But today's seemingly ordinary notice made him feel a little creepy. He was actually predicted in advance. He was puzzled. In fact, he accidentally knew about a conspiracy against him. From now on, it seems that it is possible. Jarvis, do you have the information about Lin Feng that I asked you to check last time? Tony Stark asked. Because the name Lin Feng on the cover of the diary was actually in Chinese, Tony Stark couldn't understand it at first. It was only after Tony Stark scanned it that he knew what it meant and how to pronounce it. According to the situation of this name, it should be more in line with the usage habits of Asians. To be more precise, it is in line with the single character surname habits of China and South Korea. However, judging from the naming habits of Koreans, this name does not look like a Korean name. The possibility is only 20%, and the remaining 80% probability is Chinese. Jarvis's mechanized voice came. According to the information we searched before, if it is Chinese, we hacked into the household registration management websites around the world and searched for a lot of relevant Chinese information. There are about 283,765 people whose names match the two Chinese characters of Lin Feng. Hearing so many people, Tony Stark felt a headache. There are really a lot of Chinese people, and this name is really common. There are 273,560 in China, and the rest are among Chinese people all over the world. Jarvis said. First rule out those who are abroad. Tony Stark said. I see the records in this diary. It seems that they can see my news every day. It is likely that they are locals. After all, if it is a foreign media, they may not pay so much attention to my gossip. Tony Stark thought for a while and said that he has been on the front page of the news more than once or twice, which is normal, but if you can often see gossip, it is likely that you can only be in the United States. Foreign media are not so free to leave the board for his gossip, unless it is a very sensational thing. Only paparazzi in the United States will track his every move every day like this. Take out all the Chinese people named Lin Feng in the United States. Tony Stark said. There are about 4 to 5 million Chinese in the United States, which is not a small number. To find them all in an instant is enough to show the strength of Jarvis's algorithm and computing power. There are 138 people named Lin Feng in the United States. Jarvis said. Among them, how many have a better family background, or at least are middle class or above? Tony Stark said. There are 16 people above middle class, and one of them is in the wealthy class. He is a third-generation immigrant, and his family assets exceed 100 million. Jarvis answered directly. Lock on this third-generation rich man. Tony Stark said. Also pay attention to other middle class and above people named Lin Feng, and the others can be paid attention to at the lowest level. Sir, how do you judge? Jarvis said. Because it's written in my diary that he waits for me to be kidnapped in Afghanistan every day, and then waits for the stock price to collapse, and then he comes to buy the bottom. Since he comes to buy the bottom, he must have some money in his hand. Otherwise, if his own economic conditions are very poor, can he afford to buy stocks? What was the price of our stock yesterday? $98 per share. It's not that I look down on them, but even if ordinary people know this news, they can't have enough capital. Tony Stark gave his analysis. This is also the current situation of Americans. Most Americans have every penny arranged clearly. If they suddenly have to take out $500, they will be stuck, and their capital chain will collapse, not to mention buying their stocks at the bottom. If you only have a few $100s on hand, how much money can you make, even if you buy at the bottom? Chapter 3. Which good person writes a diary? So the key suspect is this rich third generation Lin Feng. Of course, the so-called rich third generation is only for ordinary Americans. With Tony Stark's net worth of tens of billions of dollars, just this trip to Afghanistan will at least earn their company hundreds of millions of dollars. That little money is really not worth mentioning. hack into his account, and see how much money he has. Tony Stark said. For Tony Stark, who has artificial intelligence like Jarvis, there is no place in the world that he can't hack into, except for a few places. Of course, he still won't mess around. In addition to his own conscience, it is also because he is one of the biggest beneficiaries of this set of rules. If he takes the lead in destroying it, that's fine. You can't treat others as fools. If you are really targeted by the government, it will be very troublesome. I checked the records and his parents deposited $1 million into his account a few days ago. Jarvis said. That's right, it's probably him. Tony Stark touched the mustache on his chin and said. Is there any more information about him? For example, is he a bad kid? Is he connected to any gangs or terrorists? Or are there any such people in his network? Tony Stark instinctively didn't want to believe the so-called prophecy. He was more inclined to believe that Lin Feng had heard about this from someone around him. All the information about him that we have found so far shows that he is a standard growth template for Chinese youth. He is smart, has good grades, is self-disciplined, and works hard. He has no contact with gangs. His social circle, before he became independent from his family, also lived in a high-end villa area. So far, no one in his network who could plan a kidnapping case has been found. Jarvis said. Smart, good grades, self-disciplined, and motivated. This is exactly in line with our stereotypes of Chinese people. Tony Stark muttered to himself. This doesn't sound special, does it? If there is anything special, it's about a month ago, he had a car accident and miraculously saved his life. Jarvis said. Other than that, his life trajectory is very ordinary. Encountered a car accident? Awakened superpowers? This thought flashed through Tony Stark's mind, but he still thought it was too ridiculous. Especially the prophecy here. If it was just a prophecy that he would be kidnapped in Afghanistan, then he might have obtained some advance information. For example, he knew the resolution of the board of directors in advance in some way, but he dared to predict that he would shut down the weapons department of Stark Industries? It's outrageous. The main cash cow of Stark Industries is this weapons department. Although other departments have also made achievements, at least 80% of the stock price is supported by the weapons department. This is the result of the Stark family's decades of operation since his father's time. Unless he is crazy, how could he give up? And he also has to take into account the thoughts of the shareholders. Although his family accounts for the majority, the power of other shareholders combined is still not to be underestimated. In the United States, there are founders who have been kicked out by the board of directors. On the contrary, there are many. So he would never do such an outrageous thing. But even if he really disbanded the weapons department and gave up the arms business, the stock price of Stark Group might plummet. That is, he had to make such an outrageous decision. But why was Lin Feng so sure? As if he was sure that he would make such a decision. Or did he promise someone something during the kidnapping? Is this the price of being rescued? For a moment, Tony Stark's mind was a mess. Sir, if that's the case, why don't you go to the door and ask on the spot? At this time, Jarvis asked. Because once I have such an idea, I will immediately feel a sharp pain in my mind, and a very terrifying will is warning me not to have any contact with this Lin Feng. Tony Stark sighed and said, according to his temper, if he could go directly to the door, he would go directly to the door on the spot. And, what if he doesn't have any prophetic ability, and just knows some news? That would be a warning to the snake. Tony Stark said. The key is that he still feels that the warning of that will may be more serious than he imagined. He feels that, if he really comes to the door, he will die before he can even say anything. He is a super capitalist, one of the top few people in this world, one of the masters of this world. He doesn't want to die because of this. He cannot know the truth of the matter, but he can't die. He hasn't had enough fun yet. Keep an eye on this Lin Feng first. Tony Stark said. Sir, this Lin Feng has started writing a diary again. Jarvis suddenly reminded. Sure enough, the diary on the desk began to appear out of thin air again. Tony Stark was a little speechless, and he saw that it was broad daylight outside. Who writes a diary? Who would write their thoughts in a diary? Not to mention, who would write a diary during the day instead of at night? He has observed these few days that Lin Feng's diary writing has no regularity at all. Sometimes Jarvis wakes him up in the middle of the night to read the diary. Sometimes, early in the morning, after working on a model, he was woken up not long after falling asleep. He hated it so much. Now it's better. He can write in the daytime. May 7th. Weather, sunny. I just passed by a neighborhood in New York. It is said that this is a street where the Hulk and the Abomination fought a few years ago. The restoration work has not been completed until now. The work efficiency of the Americans is really not good. However, considering that their firefighters went to rescue in 911 without fear of death, they couldn't even get the pension in the end. The world of capitalists is really cruel and ruthless. Seeing this, Tony Stark frowned. Why did he feel like he had heard this name somewhere before? What is this Hulk and the Abomination? Can the battle affect a street? Did they use heavy weapons? Tony Stark couldn't help but say, "Sir, there was indeed a related incident several years ago. The streets near the Chinese theater were suddenly devastated, and several stores owned by the Stark family were affected. The government's explanation afterwards was that they were caused by a terrorist who blew himself up." Jarvis answered at the right time. Chapter 4 Iron Man knows you are a transmigrator. Tony Stark only felt disdain for the so-called official statement. If the official words of the United States could be trusted, sows could climb trees. As a big capitalist, he knew the faces of those people too well. In other words, there is really a story here, Tony Stark said. Although I don't know how he knew it, it seems that we can verify some things. Jarvis, find a way to invade the internal network of the Ministry of Defense and see if there is any way to find the original information. Tony Stark also wanted to know whether it was really the terrorist's self-explosion that caused the death and injury of the entire street, or as Lin Feng said, there is a so-called Hulk and a person called Abomination. These two names don't look like ordinary people, like some kind of nickname, but this also verified Tony Stark's judgment just now. That is, this Lin Feng should be in the United States, or in other words, he is in New York, which is more certain. Jarvis, is the third generation rich Lin Feng mentioned just now in New York? Tony Stark said. According to the information that can be found at present, he is indeed in New York. Jarvis said. Bingo, I guessed right. Tony Stark said with a smug smile on his face. Tony Stark didn't think it was strange that the firefighters mentioned in the diary could not receive pensions. After all, capitalist governments have always been inhumane. They used to suppress veterans of World War I, so this is nothing. Have you found the Robert Downey Jr. who looks like me mentioned in this article? Tony Stark asked. No one named Robert Downey Jr. that I have found looks like you, sir. Jarvis said. Tony Stark frowned, which means that what Lin Feng said is not alright. At this time, Lin Feng was writing a diary and watching the news in his large flat. In fact, since he traveled to this world, he thought he would awaken some superpowers or systems, but he only got a diary system. As long as he wrote a diary every day, he could accumulate some energy. When the energy slot in his mind was completely filled, he could win a lottery. After today's diary is completed, the energy tank will be filled for the first time. He will also win the first lottery. He was inexplicably excited. But soon, he noticed the news broadcast on the TV next to him. It was a news report about a bank robbery. It was nothing. In the United States, robbery was not a very bizarre news. But when he saw the news, a figure appeared. A woman wearing ancient Greek-style armor defeated the robbers at lightning speed, and then left the scene in a chic manner. All this happened to be recorded by someone. He was stupid, because he was so familiar with that woman, that he couldn't help but blurt out, Wonder Woman. Lin Feng couldn't help but say, it was just a ghost. How could he see Wonder Woman here? This was even more outrageous than him traveling to this Marvel world. That is, he actually saw Wonder Woman in the Marvel world. He even carefully recalled the memory of his previous life. In the memory of his previous life, there was no Wonder Woman, but now, such a Wonder Woman appeared. Is this a mixed American comic world of Marvel and DC? Lin Feng really felt like he was in a mess in the wind. He immediately recorded it in his diary. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. 3 big oh my god came up, which directly alarmed Tony Stark, who was still analyzing all this. What's wrong with him? Tony Stark didn't understand. Today, I saw Wonder Woman Diana in the news. My 3 views collapsed. This is more shocking than finding out that the portrait hanging on the building was not a young version of Robert Downey Jr., but Tony Stark. Things like time travel are already outrageous, and I also traveled to such an outrageous world as Marvel. But I just accepted that I came to the Marvel world. How come I suddenly saw Wonder Woman? Isn't that a superhero in the DC universe? Could it be that this is a comprehensive comic universe? Soon, Tony Stark saw it, and the diary kept appearing, and his 3 views suddenly exploded. At the same time, it was not only Lin Feng who had his 3 views exploded, but also Tony Stark. What do you mean? Time travel? Marvel? Wonder Woman? Superhero? What are they? Tony Stark was a little dumbfounded, feeling that the amount of information was too much. Jarvis, can you explain to me what time travel is? Tony Stark asked a little unconfidently. According to the information that can be found now, time travel refers to a word that a person reaches another world. There are many such words in current literary works, animation, film, and television, and even games. Do I need to list them specifically? Jarvis replied. No, I just want to ask if there is something wrong with my understanding. Tony Stark said. And superheroes, are we talking about only Captain America? Yes, sir. The superhero generally mentioned in the world now is Captain America. Jarvis replied. Even in this world, the United States is still the #1 in the world. With the United States' powerful propaganda capabilities, the existence of Captain America has created a new word, superhero. So in this world, when people generally talk about superheroes, they are referring to Captain America. So, wait, I need to sort it out. Tony Stark also felt that his brain was not enough. So according to what he meant, let's assume that what he said is true, and not a lie. He is a non-native human who traveled from another world, or another universe. Yes, sir, but considering that his life trajectory is very complete, the result of my deduction is that it may be a soul possession or something like that. Jarvis replied. Soul possession, no wonder. Tony Stark said. No wonder the information says that his temperament has changed drastically, as if he is completely different from before. But can we analyze the situation of his original world from his words and deeds? From his words and deeds during this period, he should have been a human before he traveled. Jarvis analyzed. Chapter 5 Wonder Woman's first appearance. Hearing this, Tony Stark breathed a sigh of relief, because he was afraid that Lin Feng was not a human before he crossed over, but something like a devil, an alien, in short, not a human. At a certain moment, Tony Stark found that he used to think that he was not a racist, but now he understood that he was indeed a great human supremacist, but the current human beings have not encountered any aliens, so many people have not discovered this hidden psychology. If this Lin Feng was not a human before, then in Tony Stark's eyes, he was probably possessed by the devil. This kind of story template that only exists in the Bible, he will definitely report it at the first time, and then deal with him at the first time, even if this may involve predicting something in his future. In other words, his world in his previous life was also a human world, and then he could know our world in some way. Tony Stark said, with a little disbelief in his words. The reason is that it is a bit too outrageous. As for the parallel universe, in the current scientific community, it is the most cutting-edge research. How cutting-edge is it? Everything about the parallel universe is still a science fiction. There is no evidence to support the existence of this parallel universe. However, now he seems to have discovered the existence of the parallel universe. If this discovery were to be released to the outside world, it would probably cause a shock to the entire scientific community. Many theories would be overturned, and many subfields of science would have to be studied from scratch. Based on the situation recorded in the diary, this possibility is as high as 95%. Jarvis replied. Tony Stark touched the mustache on his chin. If this is true, then the credibility of Lin Feng's words would be greatly improved. The amount of information in Lin Feng's diary is really too much, a little outrageous. So, our universe, in their universe, is named Marvel Universe. Tony Stark forced himself to calm down and analyzed. There is another universe, the DC universe, and Wonder Woman is the superhero of the DC universe. Maybe the two universes should not interfere with each other, but now, there may be interference between the two universes. Wonder Woman came from the DC universe to our Marvel universe. No, it is a phenomenon of interference between the three universes. Isn't Lin Feng from the third universe? Tony Stark said with brighter eyes. The third universe has the ability to observe other universes. Our universe is within their observation range, and Lin Feng should be just an ordinary person in the third universe. So after he came to our universe, he would show uneasiness, but he also knew some things about the subsequent timeline of our universe. In other words, the dimension of his universe may be higher than that of our universe. According to the current speculation of the scientific community, when a universe with a higher dimension than the current one looks at their universe, it can see not only space, but also time. It may be able to see the end of the world from the beginning of the world at a glance. Time is meaningless in front of them. In Tony Stark's eyes, Lin Feng's previous life may have been in this kind of universe. And that Wonder Woman looks like a woman. Jarvis, search the latest news to see if there is any incident involving a female superhero with superhuman powers. Tony Stark said. The search results are out. Do you want to project it? Jarvis gave the answer after a moment. Project it. Tony Stark said. This is a new technology he has just developed. With the cooperation of some professional machines, it can achieve the effect of naked eye stereoscopic projection. It is still in the experimental stage and has only been installed in his residence and office. Soon, the projection was released, and Tony Stark soon saw the scene of a robbery. A tall woman wearing ancient Greek-style armor, facing a group of robbers with guns, could resist with her body out of thin air, and then sweep the robbers to the ground with amazing fighting skills, and even conjured a rope shining with golden light out of thin air, and solved all the robbers in just a moment. The people who were caught by the rope began to speak the truth involuntarily. They confessed how they planned the robbery, who was their traitor, who was the leader, etc. The whole process was very strange. Tony Stark was stunned. To be precise, this was the first time he really came into contact with the existence of the extraordinary side. In the past, he knew that some official organizations had conducted some human transformation experiments, which at most made people stronger and faster than ordinary people. He accidentally discovered this when he asked Jarvis to search for information on the internet. However, these people are far behind the strength marked in the official information of the legendary Captain America decades ago, not to mention the Wonder Woman in front of him. Just a short battle video of more than 1 minute has revealed a lot of information. Super speed, far exceeding the fastest creature known to humans. How long did it take to cross 100 meters? Maybe 1 second, or 2 seconds? Super strength, easily crushed the gangster's gun with bare hands, and stopped a gangster's vehicle that was used to pick up the escape vehicle with one punch. Invulnerable to swords and guns, although it is not known how high the level of invulnerability is. At least cold weapons should not work. Even among hot weapons, light weapons are ineffective. Ordinary bullets will only splash and make a clanging sound when hitting her. There is also an unknown glowing rope that can automatically trap people and seems to have the ability to make people tell the truth. It is obviously a magic weapon similar to myths and legends, not an ordinary thing. In just a moment, Tony Stark analyzed so much information in his mind, but obviously this is not the upper limit of Wonder Woman's ability. Super speed, super strength, and invulnerability may not be just the degree shown, because she is facing a group of ordinary people, and may not have tried her best. So, are the superheroes mentioned by Lin Feng all this kind of superhuman? Tony Stark's heart suddenly became urgent. Chapter 6 Lottery, Super Soldier Serum. Tony Stark's insecurity exploded all of a sudden. In the world of ordinary people, Tony Stark, a super capitalist, is undoubtedly a person who is high above and at the top of the pyramid. Even when facing the President of the United States, he can still talk and laugh. But facing this kind of superhuman, he is just a weak chicken who is powerless. If Wonder Woman wants to harm him, even if he has a whole top security team, he will be defeated, like cutting melons and vegetables. Moreover, according to what he knows, including what Lin Feng mentioned, there are several superhumans who may be at the level of superheroes, including superheroes from decades ago, Captain America, The Hulk just mentioned Abomination and Wonder Woman. To use Lin Feng's description of this world, it is a dangerous world. Maybe there will be more so-called superheroes appearing in the future. And if the mutual interference between the DC universe and their Marvel universe is not an isolated phenomenon, it may mean that more superheroes from the DC universe will enter their universe. At that time, I'm afraid that the whole world will be in chaos. No, he must have a way to deal with these people. Jarvis, create a new character profile. The name of the profile is Wonder Woman. Tony Stark said. Put it in the same category as Lin Feng's profile. Okay, sir, it's already been created. Jarvis said. Use big data to analyze the possible power and speed limit of this Wonder Woman. In addition, since she appears in front of the world so carelessly, it may not be just once, so find a way to pay attention to the news of her next appearance and continuously update a relevant database for a long time. Tony Stark said. The current camp is tentatively set to be the Justice and Lawful camp, but you have to find a way to research weapons against her, and then help me create a research profile. The research of a new power gun must be able to target superhumans, not ordinary people. As for ordinary light weapons, humans have not had any major updates for decades, because it is more than enough to deal with ordinary people, but it is obviously far from enough for superhumans. Although Tony Stark believes that Wonder Woman should be a good person, at least not a bad guy, the insecurity in his heart still makes him want to produce a weapon that can deal with Wonder Woman. This is also the fundamental reason why Tony Stark can develop anti-Hulk armor, anti-Thor armor and other armors targeting his teammates in the future. He simply cannot fully believe these obviously non-humans. From the perspective of humans, these are all unstable factors, and he must have a way to counter them at critical moments. Sir, if according to what Lin Feng said, you will become the so-called Iron Man in the future, and you may also be one of these superheroes, so you don't have to worry too much. Jarvis felt Tony Stark's anxiety and then comforted him. That's why I'm worried. I may have to face these people in the future. Tony Stark said. And Iron Man. Could it be that I can control the ability of steel in the future, such as refining iron ore? Tony Stark couldn't imagine what the manifestation of his ability as Iron Man would be like, so he could only imagine it himself. Lin Feng didn't know that a passage in his diary completely detonated Tony Stark's anxiety, because he himself was also very anxious now. In this strange and dangerous world, his only advantage besides this diary is that he is familiar with the plot. Now the existence of Wonder Woman is almost like a hammer hitting him hard on the head, making him dizzy. This means that the predicted future that he thought he could control has uncontrollable factors. So, what kind of world is this? Pure Marvel? Pure DC? Or all comics? Is it a comic version? Movie version? Anime version? Or TV version? Many question marks popped up in Lin Feng's mind. He hoped that it would be the movie universe that he was familiar with in his previous life. Although the movie universe is outrageous and dangerous, it is not as outrageous as the bizarre comic world. For example, in the comic world, there are countless superheroes who turn into zombies and eat the whole universe. In such a dark universe, even gods will be eaten by these zombie superheroes. Ordinary people like him are afraid that their heads will be bitten off at the beginning of the crisis. For example, there are some outrageous plots of Batman turning black, Superman turning black, or the destruction of the world. The later the story is, the more outrageous it is, and the entire multiverse will be destroyed at any time. Even forced Marvel and DC to introduce the concept of parallel universes to fill the gap, indicating that some outrageous plots are all carried out in parallel universes. However, this matter is not up to Lin Feng, and he can only pray that it is not one of those outrageous dark parallel universes. Stimulated by the incident of Wonder Woman Diana, Lin Feng no longer had the mood to continue writing his diary. He simply stopped writing today's diary and looked at the full progress bar. He silently recited a lottery in his mind. Suddenly, in front of him, a virtual turntable appeared that only he could see. The turntable spun rapidly, and after a moment, it finally stopped. Following the direction of the pointer, an option finally appeared in front of Lin Feng. Super Soldier Serum. Lin Feng did not expect that the first thing he drew was the legendary super soldier serum, which was the thing injected by Captain America. Theoretically, the formula of this thing has been lost, but Lin Feng also knows that Howard Stark later researched it again, but he died at the hands of Bucky the Winter Soldier, and the new version of the super soldier serum was also obtained by Hydra. Captain America Steve Rogers relied on this super soldier serum to suddenly transform from a small man who was bullied every day into a world famous superhero. Ding, the lottery for this issue is completed. Does the host want to receive the super soldier serum immediately for direct injection? Suddenly, a cold voice appeared in Lin Feng's mind. When Lin Feng heard this, his first reaction was that this system was alive. After he traveled through time, this system was almost as dead as before, and only appeared occasionally. At other times, it had basically no sense of existence. Chapter 7 The Demon's Fighting Talent. Get it now? Lin Feng said without hesitation. As soon as he finished speaking, he felt a surge of energy flowing into his body, and then he felt as if his body was torn apart all of a sudden. Every cell was torn apart and reorganized. It was unknown how long it had passed before Lin Feng finally breathed a sigh of relief. The transformation of the body by the super soldier serum was finally over. Lin Feng hurried to the dressing mirror to look at the changes and found that he had undergone a significant change. He was not short to begin with, but now his height has jumped to more than 1.85 meters. His originally slightly thin figure suddenly became muscular and firm. Compared with the muscles on Captain America, they were obviously smaller, but in terms of strength, they were not smaller. His appearance, which was not bad to begin with, became even more handsome at this time, and his charm value increased greatly. The clothes he wore were obviously one size smaller, and it looked like an adult wearing children's clothes, which was very funny. But he felt better than ever before, and his body was filled with a powerful force. This surge in strength in a short period of time even made him feel like he could fight against the sky and the earth. But he soon calmed down, because he knew that this feeling was just an illusion. In the Marvel world, the super soldier serum injected by Captain America Steve Rogers can only be regarded as a relatively low-level adventure, which can only stimulate the full potential of human beings and reach the peak of human beings. But humans themselves have their own limits. Even if they reach their limits, they are still not enough in front of many ethnic groups. For example, if we only count strength, Spider-Man can crush Captain America. Don't look at the later period. Even when fighting Thanos, Captain America can still get a main position, as if he can fight anyone 50-50. But in fact, it is not the super soldier serum that is strong, but Captain America himself. He is the protagonist. Under the aura of the protagonist, he can fight Thanos 50-50 for a short time. And Bucky, the Winter Soldier who was also injected with the super soldier serum, was able to fight Captain America Steve Rogers in the early stage, and achieved a 50-50 record. But in the later period of Avengers 3 and Avengers 4, basically, he can only be regarded as a super soldier who shoots with a gun. Thanos has so many powerful alien races under his command, and the racial potential of human beings can only be regarded as a small skinny monkey among them. Thinking about the supervillains who can destroy the world and even play with space and time in the later period, Lin Feng's mentality, which was originally a little floating, immediately calmed down. He still had to hide. However, although this is the case, after integrating the super soldier serum, Lin Feng's strength has been greatly improved, which should be enough on the current Earth. However, now Lin Feng can only be regarded as a physical strength that has been improved to the peak of human beings, but his combat skills are still far from it. The next step is to make up for these gaps. Captain America's strength is not only that he has developed to the peak of human beings, but also that his combat skills are a great bonus. Anyway, Lin Feng has nothing to do next. He just needs to write a diary every day. He is not in a hurry for the time being. With the first lottery, is there any fear that there will be no second or third time? As long as he writes his diary step by step, it seems that it is only a matter of time before he becomes stronger. Lin Feng washed himself up a bit, then went out to buy a new set of casual clothes. Because of his sudden height and weight gain, the slim-fitting clothes he had bought could no longer be worn. But for a wealthy third generation like him, that was not a problem. In addition to having $1 million in cash, his family would give him $10,000 a month for living expenses, which was money that 99% of American office workers could not earn in a month. After changing his clothes, Lin Feng decided to learn various fighting skills, as well as the use of various light weapons and hot weapons, to improve himself in all aspects. In this world, on the surface, it is still dominated by capital, but with the emergence of the extraordinary side, it has gradually begun to show a trend of being dominated by the strong. He must improve his strength in this wave. Fortunately, in a fully capitalized country, as long as you have money, there is nothing you can't learn. He first went to Chinatown and found a boxing gym that taught Spider-Gwen and concisely wanted to learn Spider-Gwen. This is a very ordinary boxing gym, with only a few apprentices in the entire gym. The owner of the boxing gym, Sun Li, was a middle-aged man. When he saw Lin Feng for the first time, his hair stood on end, as if he was not facing a young man, but a giant beast from the ancient times. His martial artist's intuition made him immediately aware of the danger. "Are you here to challenge the gym?" Sun Li asked vigilantly. "No, I'm here to learn Spider-Gwen." Lin Feng shook his head and said. Sun Li was a little strange. In his martial artist's intuition, Lin Feng could be described as a human-shaped beast. Could he really be here to learn martial arts? "As long as you teach me as quickly as possible, I will give you 10,000 knives," Lin Feng said. Hearing this, Sun Li's eyes lit up immediately. There are not many young people who are so generous these days. This is not because he is greedy for money, but because he has no choice but to do so for the sake of life. After Lin Feng paid a deposit of 5,000 yuan, Sun Li began to teach Lin Feng Spider-Gwen on the spot. He thought that he needed to learn step by step, especially at Lin Feng's age. He had passed the best age for martial arts, but he never expected that Lin Feng's speed of learning was so fast that it was simply terrifying. Normal people need several months to get started with basic skills, but Lin Feng only took one day to completely master it. This speed caught Sun Li off guard. In the next 3 days, Lin Feng came early in the morning every day and left late at night. Under Sun Li's guidance, Lin Feng's mastery and understanding of Spider-Gwen also improved amazingly. Like Captain America's super soldier serum, Lin Feng's fused super soldier serum also developed his talents in combat. Any field related to combat was as simple as eating and drinking water for him. Lin Feng even doubted whether the super soldier serum he fused was an enhanced version. It was too smooth to learn. In 4 days, Sun Li's old bottom was emptied and reached the peak of Mingjin in Chinese martial arts, as Sun Li said. It took Sun Li more than 20 years to reach this level, but Lin Feng reached it in just 4 days, and even surpassed it. In Sun Li's eyes, this talent is simply a monster. Thanks to book friend 202312230640144474. Thank you for your care during the new book period. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8, Punch New York, Wealth Freedom. Watching Lin Feng's departure, Sun Li's eyes were filled with uncontrollable shock. To cultivate the Mingjin skills to the peak in 4 days, even the legendary masters in history would not be so evil. He had been honing his skills for a lifetime, but he was only at the level of Mingjin, and it was obvious that Lin Feng's peak was far more than that, but he could no longer teach him. Lin Feng's learning career here also came to an end. This was also a great sense of frustration for Sun Li. The only consolation was that Lin Feng readily transferred the remaining money to him. He made $10,000 in 4 days, which was a small fortune anyway. Originally, he thought Lin Feng was just an ordinary rich kid, and he only planned to teach him some basic skills. Who knew that Lin Feng's progress was so fast and his desire to learn was so strong that Sun Li gradually got into the state and began to love talents, so he taught Lin Feng everything he knew. However, even so, he only taught for 4 days and there was nothing left to teach. Because Mingjin is mysterious, in fact, it is just a technique of exerting force. For Lin Feng, whose physical fitness has reached the peak of human beings, and whose fighting talent has been enhanced by epic levels, He has skipped the stage of strengthening his body and constantly enhancing his physical strength. He just learned some basic skills and advanced force techniques in the later stage, which is not a difficult task at all. At the beginning, Sun Li could barely serve as Lin Feng's sparring partner. At that stage, Lin Feng had great strength, but not enough skills. Sun Li could barely pass a few moves with his Spider-Gwen training. After a few days, Lin Feng also learned it completely, and he was better than his master. Sun Li no longer dared to practice with him. Lin Feng's fist was so powerful and his skills were so strong that he could kill him instantly. Unlike Sun Li, Lin Feng did not have such a deep feeling. For him, this was just a matter of course. With the development of the super soldier serum, anything related to combat was not difficult to get started. You can learn it once you learn it, and you will be proficient in it in a short time. This is Lin Feng's current state. However, he was not proud and complacent. He knew that this kind of force generating technique was useless in the face of a being far stronger than himself. Unless you also have the aura of Captain America, you will be nothing more than a super soldier in the future. Sun Li had nothing to teach him, but he also pointed out a clear path for him. There were still some masters in Chinatowns across the United States. After reaching the level of Mingjin, you have to find a way to break through to Enjin, then Huajin, and then reach the legendary Dungeon. Although the power of the national martial arts system is not comparable to the system in the Marvel world that can destroy the world at will, this is the only way he can grasp to increase his strength, and he must go all out. With Spider-Gwen as the foundation, Lin Feng started his journey of study. In addition to Spider-Gwen, Lin Feng also learned Takai, Bagua Zhang and other national martial arts. With his money, he was successful in everything he did. There were fewer and fewer people willing to learn Chinese martial arts these days, not to mention that they were in a foreign country. Lin Feng gave so much, and most of the gym owners were willing to teach. Even if they were unwilling to teach too much at the beginning, they gradually developed a love for talent under the monstrous talent shown by Lin Feng, and many of them taught him everything they knew. In a whole month, Lin Feng visited all the Chinese martial arts gyms in New York City and learned everything. He finally completed the transformation from Mingjin to Enjin and truly became an expert in Enjin. He even became famous in the Chinese martial arts circle in the United States. Many people heard that a monstrous genius appeared in New York, who gathered the strengths of many schools and formed his own school. In this circle, as long as you reach the level of Mingjin, you can open your own martial arts gym. If you reach the level of Enjin, you can open a martial arts gym. After all, masters of Huajin are rare, and there are even fewer overseas. Now Lin Feng, it is no problem to say that he is the master of New York with his fists and feet. A Mingjin level punch would kill him, and a Enjin level punch would also seriously injure him. Probably only Huajin could fight with him. This is a huge increase brought by his own strong physical body. Lin Feng was wearing casual clothes and a sweater, and walking on the road, as if he was a student who was still in school. While walking, he was thinking about where to go to study next, so that he could reach the Huajin level as soon as possible. At that time, his combat power would be improved. In this month, he wrote a diary while practicing martial arts. The days passed quickly. The energy tank in his mind was full again. He drew a prize again. Who knew that he didn't draw anything good this time, but only drew $20 million of funds. Although it is an unimaginable huge wealth for ordinary people, enough to make people financially free, it is something dispensable for Lin Feng now. However, increasing wealth is always a good thing, and Lin Feng is not discouraged. With so much money, Lin Feng's golden yuan opened the way more smoothly, and he could even smash the door of the engine master. Suddenly, he stopped in front of a French window on the roadside. There was a TV inside, playing an interview. The interviewer was none other than another big boss of Stark Industries, Abade. In the interview, Abade was laughing and sharing interesting stories about Tony Stark's childhood with the host. He looked like a good uncle, and kept emphasizing how harmonious his relationship with Tony Stark was. But except for Lin Feng, probably no one knew that he wanted to kill Tony Stark in private. You can't know a person's heart by his face. Lin Feng sighed, and suddenly there was a noise behind him. "Hey, yellow-skinned monkey, hand over your money and your bag." Lin Feng turned his head and saw several tall black thugs approaching him with fruit knives. Obviously, he was dressed well and there was money to be made. In broad daylight, in the open. Lin Feng was a little speechless. Well, this isn't the United States. This is reasonable. Especially the yellow people. Here, they belong to the bottom of the social contempt chain, and even black uncles can bully them. Don't understand English? The leading black man thought Lin Feng was a foreigner and couldn't understand English, so he repeated it again. But before he could react, his eyes blurred, and Lin Feng had already approached him and punched him. Ah! With a scream, the leading black man flew back several meters and several of his ribs were broken. Seeing this, the other black men suddenly became ferocious and rushed up. However, they were also knocked down with just one punch each. Chapter 9, Lin Feng, a dangerous person in Iron Man's eyes. Lin Feng looked at the black people lying on the ground and shook his head. They really didn't know how to live or die. His punch seemed to only break a few ribs, but in fact, he used the technique of hidden power, which had already hurt their internal organs. They would never do any physical work again in this life. If it wasn't in broad daylight, facing such garbage black people, Lin Feng would not be polite and would directly clean them up. It was all for the society, to get rid of harm. Chinese Kung Fu. Wow, it's really Chinese Kung Fu. Chinese Kung Fu, it's so cool, I want to learn it too. There were many exclamations from passers-by around. Seeing Lin Feng's appearance, his mind immediately associated with the once popular Chinese Kung Fu. Lin Feng didn't stay for long and left directly to avoid getting into any trouble. When he finished today's exercise and returned home, it was already past 7 o'clock in the evening. He fried a steak for himself, and after eating and cleaning up, he began to record today's diary. For more than a month, this has become an unshakable habit. I saw an interview with a bad A during the day. A bad A pretended to be a father to someone else by saying that he and Tony Stark were as close as father and son. How could he be a father to someone else? If they were as close as father and son, he planned a kidnapping. If they were as close as father and son, he let the Ten Rings kill Tony Stark. If the Ten Rings didn't want Tony Stark to help them make missiles, Tony Stark wouldn't even have the possibility of making the Mark I armor. He would have died directly. TSK, what a capitalist father-son relationship. But why hasn't Tony Stark gone to Afghanistan yet? Has the plot not started yet? How long do we have to wait? When Lin Feng was recording his diary, he also alarmed Tony Stark. Tony Stark, who was about to go out to attend a cocktail party, cancelled his trip and came to the secret room underground. Only he had the authority to come here. Even Pepper Potts, who could go anywhere else, didn't have the authority to come in. Inside was where he analyzed his diary every day. What did you write today? It's better not to write something perfunctory, like it's a sunny day with nothing to do. If it's something like that, don't notify me. Tony Stark took off his suit jacket and walked towards the basement. Lin Feng's perfunctory diary in the past month really made Tony Stark want to vomit. He often came with high spirits and left with disappointment. Jarvis, what is Lin Feng doing recently? Tony Stark asked. Because Lin Feng recorded most of the things without nutrition this month, although he really wanted to know something about the future and parallel universes, Tony Stark couldn't help but divert his attention. After all, he still had to deal with the company's affairs, especially how to deal with the urging of the board of directors. This month, the board of directors urged him to go to Afghanistan several times. But Tony Stark, who knew that he would be kidnapped in Afghanistan and didn't know what would happen, naturally couldn't go to die. He was arrogant, but he didn't have a problem with his brain. But the more the board of directors urged him, the more he felt something was wrong. Because although it is important to promote and display new weapons, it does not mean that he, the chairman, must go in person. Does it mean that, if he sends a director, the deal will not be concluded? This month, he has been fighting wits and courage with the board of directors. Sir, according to the feedback we have received recently, Lin Feng has been constantly learning various martial arts recently, and his progress is amazing. His dangerousness has increased rapidly. Now he is no longer a normal human being. Jarvis replied. Yes, that's right. Lin Feng is now under all-round surveillance. Although Tony Stark cannot directly find Lin Feng to ask about the multiverse and the diary, it does not mean that he has no way. The method he used is simple and crude. He spent 3 billion to send several satellites into the sky to directly monitor the world. The 24-hour monitoring ensures that no matter where Lin Feng goes, he can detect it at the first time. Of course, in addition to this, Jarvis's ability to invade various networks can be added. Basically, all of Lin Feng's actions can be mastered. For example, there are surveillance cameras in the practice areas of the boxing gyms that Lin Feng went to. Jarvis usually uses these cameras to quietly investigate Lin Feng's information. Not a normal human. What do you mean? Tony Stark asked. According to the current information, his home sends out blown up sandbags or wooden stakes every day. His strength, combined with the power generating techniques of Chinese Kung Fu, has reached the level of killing a strong adult with one punch. Jarvis said. Do you need me to project the video? Project. Tony Stark nodded. Then, a clipped video appeared in front of Tony Stark. At the beginning, it was in a martial arts hall. Lin Feng was training various Chinese martial arts boxing techniques. Every punch and kick was very powerful. Just watching from a distance, one could feel his power. Then, with the help of props, Tony Stark couldn't help but tremble when he saw Lin Feng's brutal fighting power of elbowing a wooden stake to pieces. It's only been a few days. How did this Lin Feng turn from an ordinary person into such a brutal killing machine? Then the video switched to a small alley. From the perspective, it was obviously a roadside surveillance. However, in the alley in the evening, Lin Feng was blocked by several gang members and was about to be robbed. Lin Feng killed these gang members with lightning speed. What made Tony Stark most nervous was that one of the gang members fired a gun, but at the critical moment, Lin Feng seemed to be able to predict the future and dodged it. Then he cut the throat of the gang member with a knife and killed him directly. The whole process lasted less than a minute. During this process, the combat power displayed by Lin Feng was jaw-dropping. How did he dodge it? This is not scientific. Tony Stark said, a little confused. In theory, as long as you can predict the other party's shooting, you can dodge the bullet in advance. But the problem is, how can a normal person predict it? Those who can dodge are considered normal humans? It is theoretically possible. In the Chinese martial arts system, there is an ability called the warrior's intuition, which can sense danger, but it is said that it needs to be cultivated to a very high level before it can be triggered. Jarvis said. At present, Lin Feng's level has reached the level of dark power. Then, Jarvis also listed the system information of Chinese martial arts, so that Tony Stark had an intuitive understanding. Thanks to Lion Renji for the reward. Chapter 10 Tony, how could it be Uncle Abade? In simple terms, cultivating to the realm of Mingjin is roughly equivalent to the level of the king of soldiers in the armies of various countries, and reaching the level of Anjin is to surpass the king of soldiers and reach the level of a killing machine. Tony Stark pondered for a moment and then said, how does his strength compare to that of Wonder Woman? No comparison. Jarvis replied. In the Chinese martial arts system, even if you cultivate to what they call Huajin, or even the legendary Dinjin, it is impossible for the body to resist bullets. A master of Huajin is blocked in an alley and will still be shot to death. Not to mention modern firearms, but Wonder Woman's physical strength can ignore the bombardment of ordinary bullets. According to calculations, even a large caliber sniper rifle may not be able to do anything to her. From the statistical data, Wonder Woman is obviously stronger and more dangerous. The super speed, super strength, and super physical strength she possesses are far beyond normal humans, while Lin Feng can only be regarded as reaching the peak value of humans in theory. Jarvis continued. But if I remember correctly, he was just an ordinary person more than a month ago, and he couldn't even be considered strong? Tony Stark asked. What did he do in the past month? It's not clear yet. It seems to be the result of secondary development caused by some kind of stimulation. Jarvis said. From a scientific point of view, it may be a genetic mutation. Then from an unscientific point of view, Tony Stark touched the mustache on his chin and said. Then from a magical point of view, is it possible that he has some kind of adventure similar to many fantasy novels, because he comes from another dimension of the universe? If our previous speculation is that their universe can observe our universe and even knows my future, then does he also know where some adventures that make people stronger are? Isn't this explanation reasonable? If it was more than a month ago, he would never think about it, but this world gradually began to show Tony Stark his extraordinary side, so he had to think about it. Things that the scientific side can't figure out may be feasible on the extraordinary side. Sir, this is possible. Jarvis said. This adventure is not small. It can make an ordinary person so strong in just a month. Tony Stark said with some emotion, and there was more or less envy in his words. Although this is a world dominated by capital, he is one of the top few people in this world, but who would not want to become stronger? Continue to monitor and adjust the alert level according to his situation. Tony Stark said. Especially monitor whether he has killed people indiscriminately and become an uncontrollable supercriminal. If he has this tendency, even if he is exposed, we must mobilize all resources to kill him. Tony Stark was still worried about Lin Feng in his bones. If Lin Feng couldn't control his mentality after the surge in power, he could only kill him to avoid the destruction of lives. Tony Stark was absolutely cruel. As he spoke, Tony Stark had come to the oak desk in the basement. On the desk was the mysterious diary. But when he saw the contents recorded in it, his pupils shrank slightly. Tony Stark's pupils shrank slightly when he saw this. What? He saw a name that shocked him. It was none other than Abade. A person he had never doubted. Because when he suddenly heard the bad news about his parents, it was Uncle Abade who was by his side. And it was not until he graduated from college and got a doctorate that he came back to take over the Stark Group. Before that, it was Uncle Abade who helped manage the huge Stark Industries group. Because of this, he never doubted it at all. Even after his father died, Abade vaguely replaced the role of his father in his heart. However, he never thought that his uncle would want to kill him. Why? Why? He couldn't find a reason at all, especially when he was still making Stark Industries prosperous. Even if it was just to make more money, he shouldn't have attacked him. No, if it was for making money. Tony Stark suddenly thought of a possibility. The Stark family had been a single-line family for several generations. If he died, the assets and shares he left behind, without a will, and without a wife and children, would be eaten up by others. This is the cruelty of the capitalist world. Those big families advocate having many children and more blessings, not without reason. But he still didn't believe that his uncle Abadia would do something to him. This was almost to destroy his belief and burn his trust for many years. This may be a special attempt to provoke the relationship between me and Uncle Abadia. Tony Stark muttered to himself. He didn't believe it at first. But the suspicious nature of being a capitalist also made him suspicious. Although his trust in Abadia made him not want to believe it all, his nature as a capitalist made him instinctively suspicious. No, he must get to the bottom of this matter, even if it was just to eliminate his suspicion of Uncle Abadia. It was also necessary. Sir, although it may be a provocation, it never hurts to investigate. Jarvis put forward his opinion at the right time. That makes sense. Tony Stark quickly made up his mind. Although he looked careless on the surface, as if he was not interested in many things and didn't care, he still cared about his own life. If that was the case, he would not be soft-hearted. In the capitalist world, there are many cases of fathers and sons fighting to the death in court, let alone an uncle who is not related by blood. Now immediately hack into all the internal networks of Stark Industries to see if there are other internal networks that I didn't know before. In addition, immediately start searching for all the information that can be searched and investigate the communication records of all Uncle Abade's mobile phone numbers to see if there are any calls to Afghanistan. If there are, I want to know who it is. Tony Stark immediately ordered, and many thoughts emerged in his mind. Chapter 11 New feature, video appears. Sir, we have checked Abade's phone records. There is a satellite phone with an unknown number. The signal shows that it is in Afghanistan. Jarvis reacted quickly and found out something immediately. Tony Stark's eyes were a little cold. It was not surprising that the user of the satellite phone could not be found for a while, because this was also a common practice of many criminals. But Abade's circle of friends should be well-known big shots. Who would use a satellite phone that completely conceals their own information? In other words, if his original suspicion of Abade was only 1%, then now it has immediately increased to more than 50%. He really has an intersection with the people in Afghanistan. trace all the information of a bad A, as well as the documents he has approved in the company over the years, the transactions he has made, his circle of friends, the people he knows, his connections, everything. Make a summary report and give it to me as soon as possible. Tony Stark gave a lot of orders in one breath. Thanks to Jarvis, an artificial intelligence with almost unlimited computing power. Otherwise, he might need to support a whole team to do this. With Jarvis, Tony Stark is like carrying a large team with him. After saying this, Tony Stark suddenly slumped in his chair, as if all his strength had been drained out. Although his reason made him take immediate action to investigate a bad A, his emotions still could not accept it. This is still a huge blow to him. I hope not. Tony Stark finally muttered to himself. That's when he knew that he needed to pay attention to his own safety, because someone really targeted him, and he would not be safe now. Suddenly, at this moment, Tony Stark saw that there was a video below the diary, which had never appeared before. This diary was too magical. He couldn't help but click on the video and watch it. The title of the video was written, "I'm Iron Man." One sentence opened the era of Marvel, and one sentence ended the era of Marvel. Seeing this title, Tony Stark didn't understand it a little, but then he began to watch the movie immersively. What shocked him was that the person who came into his sight was not someone else, but himself. In the picture, he was answering a call from Pepper Potts. He was shocked. Could it be that he was secretly photographed in his own home? But before he could think about it, he heard a piercing sound in the next second, and then his eyes widened, and he almost fainted. At this time, the person behind Tony Stark also appeared in the picture. Breathe, relax, relax. Tony Stark will never forget this voice until his death. He is too familiar with it. This person is his uncle Obadiah. After Obadiah knocked Tony Stark down, he began to explain to Tony Stark calmly. You remember this thing? It's a pity that it didn't get the government's approval. It can cause short-term paralysis. Sometimes, it's really very useful. Obadiah said calmly, while holding the weapon in his hand. Tony, I gave them the order to get rid of you. Actually, I had my concerns. You are a golden goose that lays eggs, but fate has let you escape. This is your last golden egg. Do you really think that the ideas you come up with are yours? Your father helped me build the atomic bomb. If he was as selfish as you, what would the world be like? As Obadiah said this, he grabbed the arc reactor from Tony Stark's chest. At this time, Tony Stark could do nothing but watch Obadiah take the things away. Look, Tony, this is your road to joy. This is your last legacy. Now we can say that it is the core of a new generation of weapons. With it, we can firmly control the world in our hands. Without a doubt, I hope you can see my prototype. I'm not afraid of you laughing at it. It is not as stingy as you. It's a pity that you also involved Pepper. I wanted to let her go. As Obadiah said this, he took the arc reactor away. Tony Stark, who was outside the screen, was horrified when he saw this scene. He had only 50% doubt before, but after seeing this picture, he was almost 100% sure that it was indeed a bad A. What made him even more unbelievable was that he couldn't believe that his kind uncle Obadiah actually wanted to get rid of him. Obviously, this picture should be the picture of him coming back from Afghanistan after being kidnapped. It just didn't show how he was kidnapped, but some details have been highlighted. Jarvis, cancel all permissions for Obadiah to enter the room. Tony Stark said almost immediately. The reason why Obadiah was able to sneak in quietly was not because of his high hacking skills, but because of Tony Stark's trust. Tony Stark gave him the highest level of authority second only to himself, the same authority as Pepper Potts. Both of them could enter Tony Stark's mansion without Tony Stark's consent, without any obstruction. This is a permission that no one else has. Obviously, the person in the picture paid the price of his life for this trust. It has been cancelled, sir. Jarvis said. Tony Stark sighed. Although Jarvis often behaved like a normal person, he was just an artificial intelligence after all. If he was a real person, even if Obadiah had such authority, he would have realized that something was wrong when he sneaked into the house quietly without any notification. He was now sure that Obadiah really wanted to kill him, but he still couldn't figure out why someone could record the future. This was unscientific. Could it be that the picture was really observed from other higher dimensional universes? Wouldn't that confirm his previous speculation that the universe where Lin Feng lived in his previous life was really higher in dimension? In the picture, his performance was also very strange. For example, a bad small weapon should only be a weapon that can paralyze people in a very short time. After a long time, he should have recovered. But his expression didn't look like he was paralyzed, but poisoned. His face was pale and terrifying. And this inference is very likely true. Chapter 12. Mark Armour's first appearance, an explosion of information. But if it wasn't like that, how could Abade let him go so easily? When he recovered, he would call the police and Abade would go to jail. With the means of the capitalists, he could be sure that Abade would have to spend his whole life in jail. If he wanted, he could just write a check for $1 million and countless people would want to help him, so that Abade would die in prison without a burial place, and not even a message would be spread. So Abade must be sure that he would die. So what does his suspected poisoning state have to do with the arc reactor? Yes, he recognized what it was, or rather, it was a new technology that he was still imagining. The arc reactor, a cold nuclear fusion technology. It was just still in the conception stage and had not been fully conceived, but obviously, in the future, after he returned from Afghanistan, this technology would be mature. It could be used directly. If it's cold nuclear fusion. Tony Stark suddenly thought of it, thinking of what Lin Feng had mentioned in his diary before. If we assume that what Lin Feng said in his diary is true, then his future self, after being kidnapped in Afghanistan, will have a completely different temperament and close the weapons department. He thought Lin Feng was crazy before, or he was crazy. It's easy to say that giving up the weapons department, but that is equivalent to giving up the foundation of Stark Industries, which is simply finished. But what if Stark Industries has another way now? The arms industry is of course a very profitable industry. If there is anything more profitable than arms, it is the energy industry. Which of the rich countries in the Middle East doesn't make a lot of money by selling oil? This is also why he studied related technologies in the first place. Nowadays, there are only a few countries that can play with nuclear fission power plants. If nuclear fusion is developed, as Abade said, this is the energy key to open a new era. After the development of nuclear fusion, Stark Industries will inevitably soar. It is also easy for him to become the richest man in the world. It is even foreseeable that a single person's wealth can rival that of a Cheeble. He immediately understood that Lin Feng was waiting for him here. Waiting for him to close the arms department, and then the stock price will plummet, and then enter the market, to buy at the bottom, and when his own nuclear fusion technology is developed, the stock of Stark Industries will soar, and by then, it is possible to increase tenfold. At this time, many things that were originally incomprehensible have been figured out. He didn't care that Lin Feng took a ride to make some money, he just cared about how Lin Feng knew it. But there was still one thing he didn't understand, why he put the arc reactor in his body, because it would lead to an obvious problem, poisoning. If he used the material he was thinking of now, palladium, it would cause palladium poisoning. But now he can know it with just a glance. There is no reason for his future self not to understand it, unless he has no choice. Even if he will encounter palladium poisoning, it can only be like this. There are more and more questions in his mind, and he continued to watch, and the self in the picture seemed to be poisoned, with a pale face and a green color crawling all over his face. Jarvis, analyze what kind of disease can make me become like that in such a short time. Tony Stark said with a cold face. In the picture, Tony Stark struggled to go down to the basement and found the abandoned arc reactor. He struggled and was about to fail. At this time, the robot hand that he had been complaining about before sent something to him, and then he broke the glass outside the arc reactor. Tony Stark's mind was working frantically. He wanted to figure out what the reason was that he seemed to die if he left the arc reactor. And this problem seemed to be known to everyone, even Abade. The scene changed, and Abade put the arc reactor snatched from Tony Stark into the huge mecha. Mecha? Tony Stark never thought that he would see such a thing. Abade actually has the ability to develop such a thing. Tony Stark was a little puzzled. It was not that he looked down on a bad day, but the fact was that the scientific researchers in the entire company, added together, were not enough for him alone. At this time, Tony Stark was rescued by his black friend Colonel Rhodes, but he was still worried about Pepper. In the picture, a bad day, wearing a huge Iron Overlord armor, had already found Pepper. Tony Stark saw this scene and couldn't help but feel nervous. "I don't need you anymore, dear," Abade said with a cold smile. He was about to take action, and seeing Pepper was about to suffer, at the critical moment, a figure flew over directly, but it was none other than Tony Stark who drove the Mark II to rush to the rescue in time. The two sides launched a fierce confrontation on the street. But it was obvious that Tony Stark was at a disadvantage, because his arc reactor did not have much electricity. It had been retired, and only 19% was left when it just appeared. "For 40 years, I have always supported you. I built this company from scratch. I will never allow anyone to stand in my way, let alone you." In the video, Abade beat Tony Stark violently, while venting his resentment for so many years. Obviously, his dissatisfaction with Tony Stark has been going on for a long time. Seeing that he was completely at a disadvantage, Tony Stark simply flew into the sky, and Abade, driving the Ironmonger, chased him closely. The two flew into the sky one after the other, and even alarmed the US military. Fortunately, Colonel Rhodes arrived and stopped the plan of the fighter plane to take off and intercept. The two flew higher and higher, until Tony Stark's energy was about to run out, and he was caught up by Abade and grabbed directly. "I caught up with you, Tony. I have more power than you." Faced with this situation, Tony Stark simply asked back, "How did you solve the problem of freezing?" Before Abade could react, Abade's Ironmonger had already frozen into ice. In an instant, Ironmonger also short-circuited and fell from the air. Tony Stark also consumed most of his power. In the end, he staggered little by little and finally landed safely. He was almost killed by the fall. Chapter 13 The Factors, I'm Iron Man. Just when Tony Stark outside the screen couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, he suddenly found that Abade suddenly appeared and easily suppressed Tony Stark again, and all of Tony Stark's weapons failed when facing this big guy. "Wow, it's really embarrassing," Tony Stark teased, but his face was extremely solemn. How could he not see that the design style of this Ironmonger and the armor he wore in the picture were exactly the same, and it was probably designed by himself, probably designed to face different situations. In a real fight, his armor was too petite and the energy was obviously not enough, which was obviously too disadvantageous. However, he also silently recorded these points in his heart, such as flying too high, which would cause ice, so there must be a de-icing design, and heavy weapons specifically for large armored targets must be developed. At this time, Tony Stark in the picture also began to cooperate with Pepper Potts, and finally, at the critical moment, the entire Ironmonger was blown up into the sky, and finally won the final victory. Facing his first battle in the future, Tony Stark's evaluation was not good, and it could only be described as ugly. In the end, he didn't even beat Ironmonger. But it must be said that the design of this armor was very pleasing to Tony Stark, because he naturally had such an idea in his mind, and he also checked a lot of information at ordinary times. Otherwise he would not be able to complete the design and manufacturing in such a short time after being captured in Afghanistan. But his idea was just a vague idea. Now this picture has concretized his vague idea and appeared in front of him, letting him know what to do next. Iron Man, it seems not bad, Tony Stark muttered to himself. Tony Stark thought of Lin Feng's diary, calling him Iron Man. Originally, he didn't understand why he was Iron Man at all, and thought he had awakened some ability to control steel. Now he probably understands. It turns out that the so-called Iron Man is probably like this. The picture continues. In a conference room, Tony Stark is looking at a newspaper. The headline on the front page of the newspaper is about who is Iron Man. While he and Pepper were chatting quietly, Coulson, the head of the novice village, stepped forward and handed a small note to Tony Stark, and then said, "Alibi." "Okay." Tony Stark took the note and said, "You were on the yacht at the time. The Port Authority proved that you were anchored at Avalon Harbor all night, and there are testimonies from 50 guests." Coulson explained. In fact, I think it's better to say that it was only Pepper and I on the island that night. Tony Stark took a look at this obviously fake alibi and said directly, "We can't fake it." Coulson said with a faint smile, "Just read it." "Okay." Tony Stark shrugged and said indifferently, then looked at the content of the note and said, "A bad day is not mentioned. We handled it. He went on vacation. You know, the safety of small aircraft is really poor." Coulson replied, "But how to explain the bodyguards who were made up out of thin air?" Tony Stark said, "Here's me. I mean, how do you explain this, weak link? This is not the first time I've done something like this. As long as you follow the official statement, everything will be fine. You only have 90 seconds. Coulson said this and was about to leave. In the picture, Tony Stark walked to the press conference. War Machine Rhodes, who had been waiting there for a long time, said, "Next, Mr. Stark, a statement is prepared, but he will not answer any questions. Thank you." After that, Tony Stark walked up and said to the reporters, "I haven't appeared in some days. Just read from the script." Some people speculate that I was personally involved in the incident that occurred on the expressway and on the roof. He was about to read from the script when he was interrupted by a reporter who was very unruly and said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Stark, do you really think we will easily believe that it's just a bodyguard?" The female reporter confidently wanted to expose Tony Stark's lie and said, "Wearing armor and showing up at the right time, but in fact, you usually..." But before she finished her words, she was also interrupted by Tony Stark, and he would not tolerate it. Tony Stark said directly, "I know what you mean. It's okay to question the official statement, but you shouldn't speculate and say I'm a superhero for no reason. I didn't say you were a superhero." The female reporter smiled faintly and then said, "No, that's good. If that's the case, it would be too ridiculous. I'm not cut out to be a hero." Tony Stark took a deep breath and said, "Obviously, I have too many character flaws and have done too many wrong things. I have a bad influence." Before he finished speaking, Colonel Rhodes next to him reminded him to read from the script. Then he took a deep breath, looked at the content on the note, made an important decision, and then said, "The fact is, I'm Iron Man." In an instant, the entire press conference was in an uproar, and everyone was shocked. Before this, everyone thought that Tony Stark would never admit it, which was also the official routine, but no one expected that he would actually admit it like this. Tony Stark thought of the title of the video, "I'm Iron Man." The original sentence that opened the era of Marvel refers to this. The sentence that ended the era of Marvel also refers to this sentence. At this time, the picture turned again and saw a desolate battlefield ruins. Tony Stark was wearing a never before seen armor, which looked more technological, but was full of damage. Obviously, a shocking battle had taken place. He knelt on the ground with his legs apart, and his right hand flashed with many lights like electric currents. It was clearly visible that there were several gems attached to it, and Tony Stark seemed to have been electrified, constantly twitching, and only after a moment did he come back to his senses. He stared at the distance and said, "I am Iron Man." As he said that, he snapped his fingers, and in an instant, the whole screen turned white, and then this video ended. Chapter 14. Tony, is this my end? Is this my ending? My future? The last sentence ends the era of Marvel. Tony Stark looked at himself in the picture, who was obviously middle-aged and elderly, wearing a high-tech armor, and a battlefield that had obviously experienced a very tragic battle. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Compared with the high-spirited look when he first said, "I'm Iron Man," when he said "I'm Iron Man" later, he was extremely resolute. Obviously, he had made some kind of determination. It was not difficult for Tony Stark to think that it should be a very tragic battle, but he didn't know the cause of the battle, the end of the battle, and what kind of energy the electric current on his armor was. But the result must be very tragic, because he saw from the title of Lin Feng's diary video that it ended the era of Marvel. There are many ways to interpret this sentence, but there is no doubt that no matter which one it is, it will not be a good result. Especially for him, this is even more true. After that snap of the fingers, it should have been paid at a very tragic price. So Jarvis, what do you think my final outcome will be in the video? Tony Stark asked. Is it death? According to the content of the video, 30% of the people will be seriously injured, 20% will die, and 50% will be slightly injured. Jarvis replied. Tony Stark fell silent after hearing this. In any case, it didn't sound like good news. He couldn't wait to know the news in the future, but after knowing some of it, he felt very upset. Tony Stark hasn't experienced many things yet. He is not the Tony Stark who is comparable to gods with his mortal body. Now he is high-spirited, a playboy, a typical American successful person, and he can't accept such a tragic thing. In fact, now he is not even Iron Man, and he doesn't even have a battle armor. But no matter what, it's better to know something than nothing. Tony Stark said. First, cancel all of Obadiah's rights, and don't allow him to enter and leave my home and office at will. Second, check all shareholders related to Obadiah and see if the shareholders who stand on his side are involved in his kidnapping of me. Tony Stark said. In addition, collect all the information about Obadiah, including finding all kinds of information in the intranet. I want to send him to jail. Although Tony Stark was reluctant to believe that it was Obadiah who did it, the result was out. Whether he was willing or not, he had to face this reality. At this time, his reason took the upper hand again. He knew that this problem had to be solved. Even his heart was boiling with murderous intent. Since Obadiah had made no secret of wanting to kill him, he had no reason to show mercy. First find evidence of Obadiah's crime, then send him to prison, and finally let him die in prison. It is not difficult to do it in the United States. After all, being shot in the back dozens of times can also be suicide, right? Then, help me create a new file name, Iron Armor. Give it a name, for example, Mark Armor. I think this name is good. Tony Stark said. Then set up relevant research preparations. This armor seems to be good. Iron Man. This name is good and suitable for me. Almost immediately, Tony Stark liked this armor and named it Mark Armor, and also accepted the name of Iron Man. Since he can research it in the future, there is no reason why he can't research it now. He didn't research it before, mainly because he didn't think about it. The video just now opened his mind. Okay, sir, a new file has been created, but should this news be told to Miss Pepper? Jarvis asked. No, don't tell her yet, lest she reveal her flaws when facing a bad day. Tony Stark thought for a while and said, but we have to strengthen her security force, and we must strengthen her security team. This video reminded him that the world is not so safe yet, and he must pay more attention to his own safety. At the same time, Lin Feng was also digesting the new functions of this diary and was very surprised because he found that the energy slot increased by uploading the movie clips of Iron Man and Avengers in his memory was much more than simply writing a diary. The first time he drew a lottery, he only wrote a diary for 7 days, but after each lottery, the energy slot in his mind would be longer, which means that he needs to write more diaries to welcome the next lottery. Now uploading videos can shorten this time, which is undoubtedly a pleasant surprise. Now he hopes to welcome the next lottery as soon as possible and draw something useful that can enhance combat power. The super soldier serum is only barely enough for him at present. After finishing today's diary, Lin Feng began his daily training, wanting to master this power as soon as possible. However, he will not be in New York City in the next few days because he has visited all the martial arts circles in New York City. Next, he will visit the masters of martial arts halls all over the United States while learning and exchanging to improve his strength to the level of Huajin as soon as possible. Time flies. 2 months have passed, and autumn has also arrived on the North American continent. At the headquarters building of Stark Industries, all shareholders gathered together for a quarterly meeting. Tony Stark sat in the main seat, with Obadiah on the right side of the conference table and Pepper, the president's assistant, on the left. Pepper was reporting to the shareholders on the overall business status of the Stark Group this quarter. And Obadiah was on the side, with his usual kind and warm smile on his face, but his heart was completely filled with murderous intent. Because after 2 whole months, Tony Stark was still unwilling to go to Afghanistan, always finding all kinds of excuses, and the reasons were also ridiculous, either to play with Miss Weekly, or to find some Hollywood star, or to do research. This made him very uncomfortable. Although this is also Tony Stark's daily routine, he usually doesn't care too much, but this time, he has made up his mind to get rid of him. During the new book period, if you have monthly tickets and recommendation tickets, I hope you can support it. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15, Cleaning Up a Bad Day. Tony Stark's existence, in a bad day's view, is so redundant. As for Tony Stark's intelligence, what does it matter? If you have money, why can't you hire scientists? If 1 is not enough, then 2. If 2 are not enough, then 20. If 20 are not enough, then 200. The capitalist's thinking is so simple and crude. The most important thing is that this company will be controlled by him, and he will no longer have to assist the two arrogant Stark father and son. Suddenly, at this moment, the door of the office was pushed open, and a group of men in black with sunglasses walked in. Suddenly, the senior executives of Stark Industries at the meeting were a little flustered and at a loss. Who are you? Abade stood up first. He was tall and strong and looked quite deterrent. You must be Abade. Please come with us. We are the FBI. Now you are suspected of colluding with the Afghan warlords to sell out the interests and secrets of the United States. Now come back with us to stand trial. The leading man in black said unceremoniously. What? Abade was stunned. He didn't expect that the matter would be leaked. In fact, this is not a secret in the circle of American arms dealers. After all, the Afghan war cost $2 trillion. This is undoubtedly a grand event for arms dealers. Moreover, arms are consumables. The more they are consumed, the more they will be purchased. Therefore, colluding with the local warlords in Afghanistan to increase consumption is not a very strange thing in the circle. Even the local garrison is helping to consume. Otherwise, how could the local theologians become stronger and stronger, and they could not be eliminated, no matter how hard they tried? But what Abade never expected was that this was obviously something under the table. How could it be known by others? What do you want to do? I know your director. Let your director come to talk to me. You are not qualified. Abade said angrily. Then he looked at Tony Stark again, hoping that he would stand up and speak for him, but Tony Stark just looked calm and did not express anything. You are no longer qualified. You are now a traitor to the enemy. Do you understand? The leading FBI officer shouted. Seeing this, when Abade was about to be dragged away, he suddenly reacted and looked at Tony Stark and roared, Tony, is it you? How can you do this to me? At this time, Tony Stark finally had a slight change in expression and said, Uncle Abade, why not? At least I didn't want you to die in a terrorist attack, right? Hearing this, Abade completely understood that Tony Stark really knew all about his conspiracy during this period of time. No wonder Tony Stark didn't plan to go to Afghanistan during this period of time. Obviously, he knew something through some channels. He didn't know how Tony Stark knew it, but at this time, it didn't make any sense at all. He was about to become a prisoner. Tony, you can't do this to me. I assisted your father and assisted you. Without me, you can't even take over safely. Abade was caught by the FBI agent. While trying to struggle, he played the emotional card. Yes, my good uncle, if it weren't for you, I certainly wouldn't have been so smooth. But I don't understand why you want to kill me. Tony Stark's eyes were filled with uncontrollable discomfort and disappointment. He used to really regard the other party as a father-like existence, to make up for the regret of losing his father in his youth. But what the other party did now really disappointed him. In the past 2 months, what he secretly investigated was shocking. Abade not only embezzled the company's money behind his back. If it was just embezzlement, to be honest, Tony Stark would not care much. At most he would give him a beating. But he also quietly opened up a route to sell the arms of Stark Industries to those warlords in the Middle East, which Tony Stark absolutely could not tolerate. In his opinion, the arms he made were to protect the people of this country, not to sell to his enemies. Although they were all death merchants, Tony Stark thought he still had a little conscience, and with his intelligence, he could make money standing still. It was still clean money, there was no need to dirty his hands. But Abaday's behavior made Tony Stark's pride and persistence over the years look like a fool. Of course, what worried Tony Stark the most was the huge steel armor he saw in the video before. He was worried that Abaday had already started to develop it, but later he checked and found that he had not. This shows that Abaday's armor may have obtained some of his technology. With his original relationship with Abaday, he might really have a way to get it, or he might open some permissions to him. But no matter how he got it in the original timeline, there is no chance now. Tony Stark was in no mood to listen to Abaday's sophistry, so he let the FBI agents arrest him, and also several shareholders who were close to Abaday. In the end, the charges they faced were not just this, but also a series of problems such as tax issues and smuggling issues, which were enough for them to spend the rest of their lives in prison. Of course, the premise is that they don't die in there. Tony, you will regret this. You are so dictatorial and unruly. Sooner or later, Stark Industries will be ruined by you. You will regret it. Abaday's roar resounded throughout the conference room, but he had already been dragged away. After doing this, Tony Stark completely relaxed, and then he said, I appoint Pepper as the new group executive CEO. You can find her for the rest of the matter. I have something else to do today, so I have to leave first. Send me a briefing on the results of the meeting. After saying that, Tony Stark left without looking back. Pepper was still in shock. She had not received any news before such a fierce turmoil. Obviously, Tony Stark and Abaday had already fought each other when she didn't know about it. The result was that Tony Stark killed Abaday with a fatal blow. This outcome was naturally the best for her. If Abaday had won, she, as Tony Stark's confidant, would have been liquidated. However, this boss was really unreliable. Now that so many shareholders had been taken away, it was hard to say whether they would come back in the future. The company was about to be in chaos, but Tony Stark ran away and left her to clean up the mess. Damn capitalist. Chapter 16. Do you think Iron Man is the only superhero? Tony Stark certainly didn't know that Pepper Potts was calling him a capitalist behind his back. In fact, she had said it to his face as well. Anyway, he just pretended not to care and pretended not to hear it. There was nothing he could do. He was born into a wealthy family. He drove his Audi all the way back to his mansion in New York and entered the underground secret room. Inside was a red and gold armor. This was one of the results of his efforts in the past 2 months. The Mark armor. In fact, he had not done anything except collecting evidence of Abaday's crimes in the past 2 months. Instead, he developed the first generation of armor, Mark I, according to the armor he would wear in the future in the video in the diary. Because he was not kidnapped and had the armor in the video as a hint, this Mark I armor directly skipped the first generation developed in the cave and was actually Mark II. The fact is, I'm Iron Man. Not a bad declaration. Suddenly, a teasing voice came. Who is it? Tony Stark turned his head immediately and saw a black man with a one-eyed egghead wearing a leather jacket. He was alarmed. This person suddenly appeared in the secret room of his office, and even Jarvis did not warn him. Nick Fury. The black man shrugged and said, you know, although artificial intelligence is very useful in many cases, it is not always so useful. There will always be loopholes. Tony Stark glanced at Nick Fury and realized a problem. That is, this person should not be here to kill him, otherwise he could have just taken action. At this time, there was only one thought in his mind. That is, he didn't know how the other party broke in, but he must fix this loophole next time. Although the person in front of him was not here to kill him, this incident really reminded him. Abaday could get close easily, and this Nick Fury could do it too. He was right. He really couldn't rely on Jarvis completely. In just a short period of time, in his eyes, Jarvis had made 2 mistakes. It seems that you don't want to kill me, Tony Stark said. As he said that, he walked to the champagne bottle on the side, poured a glass of champagne, and handed it to Nick Fury. You are really brave, just like your father. Nick Fury took the bottle of champagne and said, you are my father's old friend. But even so, you don't have to meet me in this way, right? Tony Stark took a sip of champagne, tried to calm himself down, and then said, old friend? I guess so, we know each other. Nick Fury said. He and Howard Stark knew each other, but when Howard Stark died, he was only a middle-level manager of S.H.I.E.L.D. and had not yet been promoted to a senior level, let alone becoming the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. At that time, Howard Stark was already a veteran of S.H.I.E.L.D. and his status was incomparable. I have been observing your actions during this period of time. You handled it very well. If you don't deal with a bad A, we will also deal with a bad A, Nick Fury said. You deal with a bad A? Who are you? Which agency do you represent? FBI? CIA? Or what? Tony Stark said. Nick Fury shrugged and said, I have work permits for all the organizations you mentioned, but I'm not from any of them. Let's meet formally. This is my business card. As he spoke, he took out a business card from his pocket and handed it to Tony Stark. What is this? Nick Fury, director of the Strategic Homeland Defense Attack and Logistics Support Agency. What a long and weird name. Tony Stark glanced at the unit on the business card. Are you some weird cult organization? I've never heard of it. You can call it SHIELD. Nick Fury nodded and said, this is the abbreviation of our organization, but you can rest assured that we are indeed a formal organization, and an organization jointly authorized by the 5 major powers. When there is a chance, I will let you see a photocopy of the authorization document of the 5 major member states. Originally, you are not qualified, but I can make some concessions. Okay, back to the topic. Iron Man, do you think you are the only superhero in the world? Nick Fury looked at Tony Stark and said. Hearing this, Tony Stark suddenly raised his head and stared at Nick Fury because his nickname Iron Man had not been called out yet. Although his mark armor was ready, it had not been revealed to the public. The world knew nothing about it. Who was this person, and why did he know Iron Man? Then he saw Nick Fury take out a diary from his arms. Instantly, Tony Stark's face turned ugly. This was his most confidential thing, a secret that even Pepper Potts didn't know. But now this egghead got it. Stealing is not a good habit. Tony Stark stared at Nick Fury and said, stolen. This is not yours. Nick Fury said, that's yours. Nick Fury pointed to the diary on the table and continued, such an important thing, you can't put it away. Tony Stark took a look and saw that there was another one on the table. He was relieved immediately, but he stared at Nick Fury again, wondering how he could have another one in his hand. How could there be a second copy of this thing? If this was the case, wouldn't his secrets be seen by many people? But Tony Stark still tried to calm himself down, and then said, after all, I didn't expect that someone could come to my house and buy for free. Well, the term free purchase was also learned by him from Lin Feng's diary. He had to admit that this was a kind of irony, and this irony was quite spicy. But he didn't dare to believe that the United States would become like this in the future. It's not that there is no robbery now, but it is far from the level of innocent robbery. I didn't touch your things, Nick Fury said. To be honest, when this diary appeared in front of me, I also felt it was magical and unbelievable. I believe you feel the same way. No, I got used to it quickly. After all, I'm the protagonist in Lin Feng's mouth. Tony Stark said, I don't really want to welcome someone who breaks into my house without permission, so if possible, please tell me what your real intention is? Chapter 17 The Avengers? What kind of superboy band is this? The so-called protagonist was naturally mentioned by Lin Feng in his diary. Tony Stark said that this statement was very reasonable. If he was so handsome, rich, and talented, he was not the protagonist, then who could be the protagonist? Who else? Nick Fury couldn't help but want to say that he was as narcissistic as the intelligence materials. Also, you said that, if I don't deal with it, you will deal with it. What does that mean? The government wants to interfere with private enterprises? Tony Stark frowned instinctively. As a capitalist, he was similar to other capitalists. He hated the government interference, even if it was for his own good. Of course not, we intervened as shareholders, Nick Fury said. You may not know that our S.H.I.E.L.D. is still a major shareholder of your Stark Industries group. To be precise, your father Howard Stark got our investment when he founded Stark Industries Group, but our investment was cross-holding, so you didn't know. You are still our shareholders. How could I not know? Tony Stark said a little suspiciously. Nick Fury smiled and said, it's normal that you don't know. After all, we are a special organization and it's not convenient for us to show up. Your father was the chief scientist of our shield. Later, he started his own business and received our startup fund, including your later development. He also received help from our shield, including you. Otherwise, how can you, a child, be able to smoothly control Stark Industries? Do you know how much wind and rain we have protected you? Tony Stark pursed his lips and instinctively wanted to refute, but he thought about it carefully. When he was a teenager, his parents died suddenly. He was hit hard and depressed for a long time. Later, he spent a lot of time to complete his studies. After graduation, he came back to take charge of the family business, but the whole process was very smooth. In addition to a bad day, there was indeed a group of shareholders who supported him very strangely and had almost no special requirements. In addition to a bad day's betrayal, Tony Stark suddenly realized that the water in this company was also very deep. He had been in charge of the company for nearly 10 years, but he didn't know that there were unknown shareholders behind the scenes. But today, I'm not here as a shareholder, but to invite you to join the Avengers I created. You should know that there are more than one superhero in this world. I think you should know what this word means. It has been mentioned more than once in the diary. Nick Fury said his real purpose. Avengers? It sounds like the name of a Superboy group. Tony Stark said venomously. I have no interest in your Superboy group, but about this diary, I think if you really have that much power, you should have found that Lin Feng. Yes, we have been observing his existence through certain means to ensure that his existence will not pose a threat to our world. Nick Fury nodded and said, even Tony Stark can find someone, so Nick Fury naturally has his own way. After all, he controls such a huge organization, knows the name, knows that he is Chinese, and knows some of the activities mentioned in the diary. It took him almost no effort to find Lin Feng. But like Tony Stark, he couldn't face Lin Feng directly. As long as he thought about looking for Lin Feng to ask about the diary, he would immediately have a severe headache, which made him unable to do so. It seems that there is no threat at present, and the person is not bad, Nick Fury said lightly. In fact, with the current means of S.H.I.E.L.D., the physical fitness shown by Lin Feng is a bit scary, but it is far from being impossible to deal with. What really gives S.H.I.E.L.D. a headache is a human-shaped disaster like the Hulk, or the Wonder Woman who just appeared recently. They are obviously beyond the level of humans. And the special thing about Lin Feng is that he seems to be able to predict the future to some extent, which is very noteworthy. Okay, let's stop here today. I will discuss this Avengers with you later. I have something to deal with. I'm leaving first. Nick Fury saw that Tony Stark was unmoved, and he also knew that he might not trust him. After watching him leave, Tony Stark immediately began to modify the security system. First, a bad A was able to sneak in, and now a black man with a salted egghead sneaked in, which made him doubt the security system he designed to a certain extent. After checking all the surveillance, he found that unlike a bad A, who had the authority to sneak in, Nick Fury's method of entering was simple and crude. He directly cut off the power to his mansion. Although there was a generator in his mansion, Nick Fury directly destroyed it physically. Without electricity, Jarvis could not operate. Tony Stark immediately decided to prepare a large battery in the Villa mansion. It was not used at ordinary times, but it could ensure uninterrupted power at critical times. Sir, the diary has started to update. When Tony Stark was busy, Jarvis' voice suddenly appeared to remind him. He immediately put down the work at hand and started reading the diary. At the same time, Lin Feng had just returned to his home exhausted. He had just finished his learning journey. It took him 2 months to successfully improve his strength to the level of Huijin. At this point, he was almost invincible in martial arts schools across the United States, and after his body was completely transformed by the super soldier serum, he was obviously much stronger than the average Huijin master. Ordinary masters of Huijin couldn't even take his punch, and he even felt like a one-punch man. If he wanted to go one step further, he would reach the legendary Dinjin. However, according to the seniors in the national martial arts world, there might be people like that in the Chinese mainland, but they don't exist in the United States. He could only figure out the way forward on his own. The timeline of this world is getting weirder and weirder. Tony Stark didn't go to Afghanistan, and he wasn't kidnapped, but a bad A was arrested. Is this another timeline that I don't understand? Now I feel more and more that this is not the 1999 universe I know. I really don't understand this world anymore. 1999 universe. Tony Stark stared at the word intently, and his breathing became a little quickened. Chapter 18 Diary content with explosive information. 1999 universe. Does this mean that there are other universes from Universe 1 to Universe 1999, or even more universes? Tony Stark said. Yes, sir. Logically speaking, that's right. Jarvis said. What you said before, the universe he originally lived in may be a higher dimensional universe. The possibility exists, and their universe may have some ability to observe other universes. Does this count as a complete confirmation of the existence of other multiverses or parallel universes? Tony Stark said. It seems that our technology may be far behind this. At present human technology is not even able to observe the universe. The universe that can be observed is limited, let alone observing other universes. Then why is our universe called the Marvel Universe? So this 1999 universe is another name for the Marvel Universe? Tony Stark said, stroking his chin and thinking. And what is this DC universe? Could it be that, in addition to the digital number, each universe will also be named according to some characteristics of the universe it is in? Speaking of the timeline is so messed up, Ancient One doesn't care. But it is also true that now, apart from the existence of Doctor Strange, which is related to his retirement, he probably doesn't care about the others. But I hope that the timeline of this world is not some outrageous timeline. Don't wake up one day and see the whole city turned into zombies. That's too scary. It's better for the purple potato spirit to snap his fingers. When Tony Stark saw this, he immediately captured several key words. Timeline, Ancient One, Doctor Strange, the whole city turned into zombies, and the purple potato spirit snapped his fingers. It seems that each one sounds very complicated. Timeline. Does the timeline really exist? Tony Stark was a little confused. From the current scientific explanation of time, it is even difficult to say whether time really exists. It may even be that time is just human perception. As for the other Ancient One and Doctor Strange, he didn't know and hadn't heard of them. But from what Lin Feng said, it seems that this Ancient One can still take care of these messy things. Could it be some unknown big boss? As for the latter, it's scary if the whole city turns into zombies. Inferring from the context, it means that, if we regard the many possibilities of the future as something linear, one of the possibilities in the future may be the appearance of various zombies. He couldn't help but feel a little numb just thinking about the various zombies described in various literary works. Zombie movies are also one of the types of horror movies that Hollywood loves. As for what this purple potato spirit is, he doesn't know. And what does the purple potato spirit snap its fingers mean? For a moment, Tony Stark's mind was in a mess, and he felt as if he had been instilled with a lot of strange new knowledge. At this time, Nick Fury was also looking at the words that kept appearing in the diary and fell into deep thought. The things revealed in it may be related to the crisis in the future, such as the zombie crisis. For example, the snap of the fingers of the unknown purple potato spirit, which doesn't sound like a good thing. But there will be a few days of peace and good life. It won't be long before Tony Stark will announce to the public that he is Iron Man. And then what? Captain America returns. Thor comes, and finally the Avengers will gather for the first time to fight aliens. Should I stay away? But it seems that was 12 years ago. It's too early to run now. Another paragraph of text with explosive information. Nick Fury's scalp tingled. Nick, the Captain America mentioned here, could it be the Captain America we know? At this time, a slightly hoarse female voice came from the side of Nick Fury. It was none other than Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow, with red hair and a hot body. Next to her was Hawkeye Barton, as well as Coulson, the village chief of the novice village in various Marvel stories, and Agent Hill, a senior agent. These were all Nick Fury's confidants, so after Nick Fury got the diary, he also recruited them and told them about it. At the same time, Nick Fury also wanted to confirm one thing, that is, who can't tell this diary, or just can't tell Lin Feng about the existence of this diary. In the end, it was proved that it was just that he couldn't confront Lin Feng directly. If I'm not wrong, it should be that Captain America. Nick Fury nodded and said, "Oh my god, but isn't Captain America dead?" Coulson said in shock and joy. No one here is happier than him, because he has been a loyal fan of Captain America since he was a child. After World War II, the US government has been tirelessly carrying out the deification movement for many years, and Captain America has become the symbol of freedom in the United States. However, no one expected that Captain America, who has been tacitly dead for decades, would return one day. But the data shows that Captain America is missing. No one has seen him die, and no one has found his body, right? Black Widow Natasha thought about it and said, "Everyone thought that it seemed to be true. Although they had always assumed that Captain America Steve Rogers was dead, who really saw him die. But at his current age, even if he is still alive, he can't walk, right? Can we still expect him to go to the battlefield?" Hawkeye Barton said. Everyone thought that the scene was quite funny. Captain America, with white hair and no teeth, wore a funny battlesuit, and then leaned on a cane and limped on the battlefield. That scene was as strange as it could be. Forget it. If the captain is still alive, we will find him sooner or later. Nick Fury thought about it, and did not continue to discuss such a headache for him. But this Thor, which Thor is it? It can't be a Thor in a myth, right? Everyone looked at each other. There are too many gods in this world, and there are many with the title of Thor. It is even possible that the nickname of an ordinary supercriminal or superhero can also be Thor. If it is really a god, it doesn't seem to be incomprehensible. After all, even vampires, werewolves and so on exist, right? Hawkeye Barton said. Among the various things that S.H.I.E.L.D. handles on a daily basis, it includes dealing with some werewolves and vampires who are ready to move. They are all creatures in myths and legends. Now a Thor appears, which seems reasonable. Chapter 19. Zombie Marvel scares everyone. But Lin Feng used the word coming. Could it be that the gods are really coming? If that's the case, we are in big trouble. It means that those legendary gods really exist. Agent Hill pointed out the problem with the wording. But if that's the case, then it means that the gods of the pantheon may really exist. Think about the gods in myths and legends who destroy the world at any time. That's beyond the ability of S.H.I.E.L.D. to deal with them. They have to use ultraviolet bullets or silver bullets to deal with ordinary werewolves and vampires, and they have to be fully armed to fight in order to barely equalize with these monsters in terms of combat power. But what if it's a god? If gods exist, then what about those demons? These are indescribable existences. Anyway, in myths, whether they are gods, demons, or devils, they basically have very powerful energy, which the current S.H.I.E.L.D. system cannot deal with. If that's the case, then we may have to consider dealing with these devils and gods. Nick Fury said. Yes, in his heart, even gods are not of our kind. What if they want to invade the earth? After all, in various myths, there are looming plots of gods enslaving ordinary humans. As for the devil, I know a playboy exorcist. Maybe I can ask him about something. Nick Fury's mind emerged with the image of a bohemian white man. He is not completely ignorant of the devil in hell, but the so-called devil, that only comes occasionally, and possesses ordinary people is not particularly difficult. Not to mention, that there are many special professions such as the holy knights of the church, exorcists, demon hunters, etc. among humans, but if they come on a large scale, it will be another matter. Hey, guys, I think, shouldn't everyone's focus be on this? The Avengers assemble to fight aliens? Alien army? Black Widow Natasha said. When everyone heard this, their faces changed slightly. Compared with gods and demons, alien invasion seems to be a script that ordinary Americans can accept. I hope it's not a large army of aliens. If it's just some aliens, we might be able to fight them. Hawkeye Barton felt a little tingling on his scalp. He was a veteran in battle, but aliens were definitely not among his veterans. Who knows what aliens are like? If that's the case, I seem to understand what Lin Feng said about not having a few good days. Nick Fury thought about it, and then said, but I think it shouldn't be very large, otherwise, the Avengers wouldn't be enough. He had a very clear idea of the Avengers he had formed. To be honest, even if Iron Man, Tony Stark and the Hulk were added, it was just a small team. He was going to use it for elite special operations, not for positional warfare. After all, even someone as strong as Hulk would have to avoid the human army, right? Moreover, if aliens could invade the Earth, it would mean that their strength far exceeded that of the Earth. Aliens, aliens, aliens. In Tony Stark's mansion, he stared at the contents of the diary. He didn't care much about other things, but the alien invasion was enough to make him worry. Thor and alien invasion, each of them is not simple. Especially when it comes to alien invasion, his mind is full of scenes from various Hollywood blockbusters and various aliens, but there is no doubt that no matter which one, the strength is far beyond the current Earthlings. Humans are considered to be overlords on Earth, but at the cosmic level, they are just a group of skinny monkeys who can't even fly out of the Earth. This made Tony Stark's heart, which was just proud of making the Mark armor, feel like being poured with a basin of cold water, chilling his heart. The Mark armor he made is enough to deal with ordinary weapons on Earth, but if it is facing aliens, it may become a toy in their eyes. We must find a way to upgrade the Mark armor and expand production. The original single-handed mode is obviously no longer suitable. Tony Stark immediately gave up the idea of going out to find a young model and had to continue to work hard. Jarvis, help me create another file. The file name is Mark II, and another file is a feasibility study on the mass production plan of Mark armor. Tony Stark said, okay, it's already been created. Jarvis said, no, we have to find a way. Jarvis, help me create another reminder. I want to transform this house into a fortress that can withstand the end of the world. Tony Stark thought for a while and said, in addition to the alien threat mentioned by Lin Feng also said that in some outrageous timelines, the whole city will become zombies. At that time, how can he protect himself and Pepper Potts? He must transform the entire mansion into an above ground and underground fortress. This kind of underground fortress for doomsday refuge was once very popular at the peak of the Cold War. Many rich people have made similar preparations, but Tony Stark never believed in this kind of thing. However, now, knowing that there is danger, he has to make preparations. And even if it is only a possible future, even Lin Feng himself said that it is difficult to judge whether it may evolve into such an outrageous future. Also, find a way to invade various biological companies around the world, as well as national level laboratories, to monitor their research progress and see if what they are researching will lead to a large-scale zombie chaos. Tony Stark thought for a moment, then said, especially focus on our country's government projects. Tony Stark knows the true face of the US government too well. If it suddenly breaks out at this time that they are researching some zombie virus, he will definitely not be surprised. In his cognition, the so-called timeline is probably a possibility. The future may not necessarily develop into a future full of zombies, but it is also possible. So he must plan ahead. If there really is such a zombie virus that may lead to the destruction of mankind, he must find a way to intervene in advance. It is not his habit to sit back and wait for death, or to say that it is none of his business. Please support me with more recommendations. Chapter 20, Erasing the Timeline? My hair is standing on end. It is indeed a bit exaggerated to say that one worries before the world worries and enjoys after the world enjoys. However, for Tony Stark, since he knows some risks in the future, he will never let it go. If there is enough dangerous information, remember to remind me. Tony Stark said. Okay, sir. Jarvis replied. At this time, in Lin Feng's New York flat, he didn't know that his diary had caused great excitement in S.H.I.E.L.D. and Tony Stark. At this time, he was still checking the progress bar in his mind, and he was almost able to draw the lottery again. No, try harder and upload a video to make up the progress bar. Lin Feng thought about it and made a decision immediately. As he wrote in his diary, he was a little bit nervous because the contents of the diary, including Thanos snapping his fingers, alien invasion, and the whole city turning into zombies, were not fake, but could evolve into a real timeline. Now Lin Feng didn't know whether he was in a certain extremely dangerous timeline, and he didn't know whether Kang, the conqueror behind the current TVA, had been killed by Loki, and whether Loki had become the god of stories. Now the whole situation is a bit messy, and he can only try his best to improve his strength. At present, the fastest and best way is to draw a lottery. If you can draw something good, your strength will be greatly improved immediately. During this period of time, he also tried to upload some videos at random, which were all messy memories in his mind, but the growth of the progress bar in the end was almost negligible. So he found that it had to be related to Marvel to grow more. Calculating the time, Thor should have been thrown down from the Nordic palace by his father. It should be the same year when Tony Stark became Iron Man. According to the normal process, this is another story of a prince's adventure. A prince lost himself in a powerful force and was eventually exiled. In the process of exile, his perception sublimated and finally found himself. What a cliché script. However, this must not be the timeline where Thor was shot dead by Hawkeye. These are all incorrect timelines. Who knows how they will be dealt with in the end? Will they be erased? Just when everyone thought that Lin Feng's diary record was over, they suddenly saw a new text emerging. When they saw the words Nordic Palace, the identity of the Thor mentioned before was almost obvious. The Norse Thor, the son of Odin, Thor. There are many Thors in various pantheons, but if the preceding modifier is Nordic Palace, then there is only one Thor. It's over. What did we say before? What we fear will come true. Black Widow Natasha couldn't help but say, the Thor mentioned in Lin Feng's diary is not only a real god, but also has a god king standing behind him, the Odin and the Norse mythology. Everyone looked at each other in bewilderment. If this is true, it means that the existence of these gods may not be some kind of individual case. On the contrary, there may be a certain pantheon. Just thinking about this makes people a little suffocated. If we assume that what Lin Feng said in his diary is true, then the existence of Thor is true, and the god King Odin behind him is also true. If Norse mythology exists, then it means that the gods in other myths may also exist. Agent Hill said anxiously. If the god of light exists, it's fine. If there are also various demons and devils, will someone find a way to summon them down? Will we still have to fight various demons at that time? It's hard to say, but it seems possible now. Carlson said. Black Widow Natasha thought for a while and said, from the situation mentioned in the diary, it looks like the root of a Hollywood movie. Someone loses himself because of power, and then is thrown to reflect, and finally finds himself. Is that right? Maybe it's really a story, Natter. Hawkeye Barton said with a smile. After all, Lin Feng complained that this is a cliched script. But the real trouble is still these, Barton. Nick Fury pointed to the words in the diary and said, it seems that in a certain timeline, or in a possible future, you once shot Thor to death with an arrow. You killed the god with a mortal body. Barton, you will go down in history. No, 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 how is it possible? How is this possible? Hawkeye Barton's first reaction was to not believe it, dare not believe it, and cannot believe it. The other party is the legendary omnipotent Thor, and he is just an ordinary person with a little bit of martial arts. Moreover, he dare not imagine how angry the Nordic heavenly palace behind him would be if he really shot Thor to death in the future. Maybe a war between humans and gods will break out. But Lin Feng's diary also said what timeline means. Incorrect timeline? I always have an ominous feeling. Black Widow Natasha said. So, is there a correct and incorrect timeline? Who defines the correct one? Who defines the incorrect one? The real trouble is not who defines the correct one and who defines the incorrect one, but the latter, erasure. How to erase it? Nick Fury instinctively felt that the word erase must represent some kind of great terror. He couldn't imagine what it was like to have the timeline erased, but he was inexplicably familiar with this process. In fact, when S.H.I.E.L.D. dealt with various things in the other world, it was almost the same process. If they were deemed to be incorrect, they would intervene. For example, if some vampires wanted to hold a blood pool party in a certain city, they would intervene, and these disorderly vampires would be erased by S.H.I.E.L.D. Thinking of this, Nick Fury felt his hair stand on end, and he felt that someone was staring at him from above. It was like he was in control of the order of the underground world on Earth. Why do I feel like I don't recognize our world anymore? Is this the world we know? Black Widow Natasha muttered to herself. Others also had the same expression. Why did this world suddenly become unrecognizable? Anyway, Barton, you have to be careful. If the future develops in the direction that Lin Feng said, we may have a diplomatic crisis. A diplomatic crisis on an alien planet. Nick Fury reminded. Chapter 21. Shooting gods with mortal bodies. I will definitely pay special attention to it. I'm not stupid. Hawkeye Barton said quickly. If he caused the wrath of the Nordic Heavenly Palace, a small figure like him would definitely be handed over to pay for his crime. It might not even be enough. A child of a god king died. How big of a deal is that? Even if it was one of his own children who died, he would have to travel all over the world to seek revenge, let alone the god king. But if he is shot to death by me with one arrow, is he still a god? Hawkeye Barton also wanted to ask. Norse mythology, Nordic god king, Jarvis. From now on, help me collect all the information related to Norse mythology, no matter what it is, I need it. Tony Stark thought that he might have to deal with a god, or even a group of gods in the future, and he suddenly felt that the world was a little bad. Like his black sister Natasha, he also felt that he couldn't understand this world. Obviously, before he became Iron Man, this world was very simple, and top capitalists like him were the rulers of this world, and it was not complicated. But now, he can't understand it anymore. Aliens, gods, and the legendary Captain America who is coming back. What's wrong with this world? Okay, sir. Jarvis said. And this timeline. I think Lin Feng's words are full of meaning. If the concept of the so-called timeline is that there are countless possibilities in the future, then not all possibilities are correct. Who defines correctness? How to deal with incorrect timelines? Tony Stark muttered to himself and brainstormed frantically, but no matter what, he couldn't imagine how to manage when the height rises to the level of a timeline. Who can be so powerful? The legendary god. Suddenly, a video appeared in the diary. Shooting Thor to death with one arrow. Hawkeye Barton's peak life, killing gods with a mortal body. Tony Stark immediately put down his thoughts and clicked on the video to watch. He also had doubts in his heart. If this Thor is the Thor in mythology, then he is too fragile. He can be shot to death with one arrow. Could it be that this guy named Hawkeye used a magic weapon? In the video, there is a huge, brightly lit base. The surroundings are pitch black, with thunder and lightning in the sky, and dark clouds. At this time, in the center of the base, there is a simple style hammer. A group of agents are conducting various tests. As the camera zooms in, two figures emerge. One is Nick Fury, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., whom Tony Stark has met today, and the other is Hawkeye Barton, who he has never met before. At this time, Hawkeye Barton is reporting to Nick Fury about the information of Thor's hammer that suddenly fell from the sky. Electromagnetic waves, neutron quantity, Vita radiation, all are off the charts. Hawkeye continued to report. Nick Fury outside the screen also stared at the screen, trying to figure out what happened in this timeline. At this time, the screen turned, and the agent standing guard outside was suddenly knocked down by a figure. In the distance, the sound of thunder was faint. It doesn't sound completely bad. Nick Fury looked at the low clouds in the sky, and it looked like a storm was about to come. It's been like this all night. Hawkeye Barton said, this artifact has some temper. Besides, no one can lift it, not even Jason who does comprehensive fitness. Nick Fury said confidently, if such a powerful item is lost, someone will definitely come looking for it. We can only pray that the other party is an ally. Artifact, hammer, Thor, combined with the information before and after, everyone who watched this video can naturally guess that the person who really comes to the door at that time will probably not be anyone else but Thor. At this time, a figure has also sneaked into the base, as if entering an empty space. Nick Fury looked at all this without changing his expression. Although the agents here performed very poorly, this is the legendary Thor. The purpose of recruiting these agents is not to deal with a god from mythology and legend. In the picture, the raindrops continue to increase with the sound of thunder, and Hawkeye Barton immediately asked, what should we do? Just like before, hold the best hope, and make the worst plan. Nick Fury thought for a while, and then said, at this time, Coulson, who was patrolling, also noticed the agents who were knocked down and quickly used the intercom to warn them, saying, someone is injured, sound the alarm. Suddenly, everyone in the entire base became alert. Coulson, report to me. Nick Fury immediately came to the control room. We have been invaded, and many agents are injured. Coulson reported, and then he saw a figure in the distance easily knocking down the elite agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Wow, I saw the intruder, a white male, in his 20s, with beautiful hair. What? Nick Fury heard Coulson's words in the headset, and was a little bit unbelievable. What the hell is this? He couldn't believe that this was the response that the savvy and experienced agent Coulson should give. This is an accurate description, sir. He is so handsome. Coulson replied. Someone should monitor from high altitude. Nick Fury instructed. Patton. It's being done. Hawkeye Patton replied in the headset. He was watching from afar in the hanging basket. He held a longbow, drew an arrow, and pointed it at Thor. He's getting close to the hammer. Kill him with one arrow. Sir, give the order. Hawkeye Patton, who was outside the screen, shuddered when he saw this scene. He thought of the ridicule in Lin Feng's diary, which meant that he might have to shoot a god to death next. There was no doubt that it would cause a huge disturbance. Don't fire yet, I want to see it first, Nick Fury said. At this time, Thor had come near Thor's hammer and revealed his original appearance. Blonde hair and blue eyes, a very typical Nordic white man's appearance. Although he was dressed very ordinary, he could still see his extraordinary demeanor. But when he was approaching, even Hawkeye Barton was amazed and said, Coulson is not bragging, his hair is really beautiful. Seeing that Thor was about to touch Thor's hammer, Hawkeye Barton could not help but remind him, Fury, the opportunity is rare, it will never come again. Don't do it yet. Nick Fury had just finished his instructions, accompanied by a sudden flash of lightning. Hawkeye Barton released the longbow in his hand and shot Thor to the ground with an arrow. Damn it, Barton, I told you to stand by. Nick Fury was furious, realizing that something big had happened. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22. The wind stopped, the rain stopped, and Loki felt that he was able to do it again. But it is obvious that Hawkeye Barton did not know what happened. When he was surrounded by agents with guns, he just said in confusion, I didn't shoot, I swear, I didn't shoot. Nick Fury came to the scene, looked at Hawkeye Barton, and then looked at Thor who was lying on the ground and said, but your arrow shows that it is not the case. Hawkeye Barton outside the screen was obviously very shocked. He actually missed, which obviously did not match his cognition. How is this possible? I absolutely can't miss. Hawkeye Barton immediately said in disbelief. Even on a battlefield full of gunfire and rain of bullets, I can't miss. What's more, it's just a thunder. But the reality is in front of us. Barton, you missed. Nick Fury said. No matter what the reason is, it eventually led to such a thing happening. Nick Fury stared at the screen, but he was glad in his heart. Fortunately, they knew this future. If they encountered such a thing again, they would know to pay attention. But he was also very shocked in his heart. A dignified god was shot to death like this? What's the difference between this and humans? Soon, the test report came out, telling him what the difference is between gods and humans. In the picture, Hawkeye Barton, who had been imprisoned, just sat helplessly, unable to believe that he would miss, muttering to himself, this is impossible, I will not miss, and I can't shoot randomly. How is the intruder? Coulson asked outside the prison. Dead, Nick Fury said. If the results of his blood sample test are accurate, he is almost 1,000 years old, and he is definitely not an Earthling. Before everyone thought about it, the picture turned again. It was already daytime. In this base in New Mexico, Coulson had just bought coffee and entered the base, but suddenly, the ground began to shake. Then, everything in the car began to float, including the coffee he had just bought, sunglasses, etc. In the distance, a huge rainbow bridge hit the ground fiercely, forming a terrifying shockwave. Coulson hurriedly got out of the car to look, but saw that as the light of the rainbow bridge faded, a huge army was slowly approaching, like a medieval army. What Nick Fury was most worried about before, the diplomatic dispute from the alien planet, still happened. My god, there are monsters coming. Coulson said in shock. Does it look like the Earth? Nick Fury asked in the command room. Maybe, but it looks more like Middle-earth. Coulson replied. At this time, accompanied by a burst of passionate music, Loki appeared. Nick Fury also arrived with a team of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, and the two sides confronted each other from a distance. Faced with this tense scene, Nick Fury asked, "Want to ask for directions, gentlemen? It seems that you are lost." The atmosphere between the two sides solidified to the extreme, ready to explode. Hearing this, Loki just smiled contemptuously, and then said, "Ha, in front of God, you'd better kneel down. We don't have such rules here, no matter who you are." Nick Fury retorted, "I'm Loki, the Prince of Asgard, the Orthodox of Jotunheim." Loki was about to finish introducing his long title, but who knew that Nick Fury's phone kept ringing. Ahem, the Orthodox King, the god of trickery. Are you going to accept it or not? I'm only halfway through my talk. The scene was awkward for a moment. The next second, the battle broke out. Loki used the icebox to freeze everything, and the scene ended. Loki is Loki, the one who pretends to be the most powerful will be beaten the hardest, ha ha ha. After the video ended, the words that appeared in Lin Feng's diary also made the identity of the person leading the troops on the Asgard side clear. That is Loki, another powerful god in Norse mythology. Unlike Lin Feng's somewhat playful ridicule, both the Shield and Tony Stark looked extremely ugly. Especially just now, they were still doubting that these so-called Nordic gods were just so-so, and they could be shot to death by an arrow. But now, with Loki using the power of the icebox, he could instantly freeze the world, which made everyone realize that these legendary gods were not as fragile as Thor before. So what was the problem? Barton, Fury really hit the nail on the head. You have caused a diplomatic crisis. Black Widow Natasha said jokingly. Hawkeye scratched his hair in distress. This was not what he wanted. The follow-up of the video has not been released, but now it seems that it is almost going to cause a head-on conflict between the Earth and the Nordic Palace. As humans are currently unable to surpass the technological level of their home planet, the appearance of any alien race can be said to be a dimensionality reduction attack. I don't believe Barton would make such a mistake. There must be other reasons. Nick Fury thought for a while and said he believed that the elite agents he trained were definitely not ordinary people, and it was even more impossible for them to be scared and loosened the bowstring because of a thunder. That would be too much to underestimate Hawkeye Barton, a top agent and SHIELD agent. But the video is too short. We can't see the follow-up. We don't even know why Barton missed this time. Black Widow Natasha said, if we knew the reason, at least we could avoid casualties this time. Anyway, if we meet this Thor again, it's best not to fight. This is just a possibility in the future. If it develops like this, war with Asgard is inevitable. Nick Fury said. No matter what the reason was for Hawkeye Barton's failure, as long as he doesn't make another move, the possibility of manslaughter will be greatly reduced. The key is that Lin Feng said that this is an incorrect timeline. That is, if we assume that there is such a person, or an institution, or an organization, no matter what god or the so-called Eastern Emperor, who manages this world, if the future develops in this direction, I feel that what Lin Feng meant is that we will be in big trouble. Black Widow Natasha said with a serious face. Everyone felt bad just thinking that there might be such an unknown terrifying existence and even able to determine the direction of the future. It was as if they were just a puppet on the stage, allowing others to control them. Chapter 23 New Ability, Homelander Panel. Then we should find a way to prevent things from developing in this direction. Hawkeye Barton said. As long as I don't shoot Thor to death, it probably won't turn out like this. Everyone thought about it, and it seemed that this was the only way so far, and things were completely beyond their control. Tony Stark also felt very troubled. The strength shown by Loki proved that Asgard was indeed not a force that was easy to provoke. At the same time, it was also the first time he saw what magic was. This was a field he had never touched before, especially his scientific brain. He couldn't imagine what the rules of these magics were. But why is this god so fragile? Is it because their defense comes from their weird armor similar to that of Middle-earth? Tony Stark touched the mustache on his chin, then thought about it and said, this arrow is not a special arrow. Even if an ordinary person is shot, he will not die immediately. However, this Thor died just like that. He wanted to say that this could not be just an ordinary person under the banner of God, but when he thought of the fact that Nick Fury in the picture had tested the other party's blood, he had lived for at least 1,000 years, and normal humans would definitely not live for 1,000 years. If we don't regard them as the omnipotent gods in mythology, what if they are just aliens? Tony Stark changed his mind. If we look at the power of the gods in mythology, then why do they still fight? Just surrender. They can easily create the world. This is not counting the various mythological systems. But now that Thor was shot to death by an arrow, it gave him a new perspective. That is, these gods may not be the omnipotent existence in mythology. Instead, they are similar to some aliens, who are more powerful than humans, but the power system of aliens is something they don't understand at present. Let's call it magic. Thinking of this, Tony Stark suddenly became more confident. The more you know, the less fear you have. As long as you show the blood bar, the gods will kill you. But why was Thor thrown down from the Nordic palace by his father? Is there a power struggle within Asgard? Tony Stark couldn't help but speculate. And this Loki, when did he become the Orthodox of Asgard? What about the other gods? At present, he still knew too little information. This timeline, which Lin Feng called incorrect, actually happened. However, the gods who appeared at present were only Thor and Loki. Jarvis, increase the efforts to collect Norse mythology materials. I want to see a compiled document as soon as possible. Tony Stark said. This Lin Feng is getting more and more mysterious. Lin Feng didn't care how much trouble his diary caused. He immediately started today's lottery with a smile. The energy bar in his mind was full again. Lottery. In front of him, a translucent roulette wheel appeared and spun rapidly. After a moment, it finally stopped. Congratulations to the host. I have drawn the template of the motherland. Primary stage. Would you like to extract it? Lin Feng was overjoyed. The motherland. People call him Little Superman. Oh no, it is Superman called Little Motherland. It can almost be said that he is a character designed according to the template of Superman. Although his reputation is also bad, his strength is really strong. Very scary. But this primary stage. Forget it. Take it first. Lin Feng said. After a moment, a ball of energy directly poured into his body, which instantly made him have an urge to vent. The energy even formed a ball of light that surrounded him. After a long time, it finally dissipated. The figure of Lin Feng, who was sweating all over, was revealed. The template of the motherland, the primary stage. Lin Feng felt it, and the energy boiling and surging in his body, and a progress bar appeared in his mind. This progress bar is the fusion progress of the primary panel of the motherland. Now only about 50% has been fused, and the rest needs time to slowly increase. However, with only this degree of transformation, Lin Feng found that he had undergone earth-shaking changes. Originally, his body was already at the peak level of human beings, but it was still within the range of normal flesh and blood creatures. But now, it has surpassed this level. He went to the kitchen and scratched it with a knife, leaving only a faint mark, without any blood stains. Afterwards, he began testing in the fitness room in his large flat, and his speed, strength, endurance, physical fitness and other comprehensive improvements. The strength alone is 5 times stronger than before the transformation, which can be called super strength. In addition, there are super speed, super endurance, super recovery, super hearing, super vision and so on. It can be said that now he is not a human being in all aspects, and has taken the first step to not being a human being. But what disappointed him was that he had not awakened the superpowers of his motherland, such as flying and thermal vision, and it is estimated that he will awaken them after a deeper degree of fusion. It's a pity that it's not superhuman blood. If it is superhuman blood, it would be amazing. Lin Feng said with a sigh. Although Superman has the weakness of kryptonite and zero magic resistance, his upper limit is really amazing. As long as he gets enough sun, he is really invincible. On the physical side, there is almost no opponent. If it is the awakened Superman bloodline, even if Thanos is in front of him, he can press the other party to kowtow and admit his mistake. Moreover, Superman also has a comic version. The upper limits of the Golden Superman and the Silver Superman are very amazing. If they really develop to the peak, they can even surpass the universe and blow out a sun with one breath. However, Lin Feng quickly suppressed this idea of getting more. Although he is not Superman, isn't Homelander also known as Little Superman? Maybe he can draw it in the future. Until now, Lin Feng's insecurity has been slightly alleviated. Unlike others, he is very clear about how outrageous this world is. Unlike the plot on the so-called sacred timeline, in some parallel time and space, it is very common to destroy the world. For example, Doctor Stephen Strange has collapsed the universe more than once, and he can be regarded as one of the most dangerous people in many universes. These superheroes and supercriminals in the parallel universes don't have any aura of the protagonist or the supporting role, and they can die in a minute. I will test the waters next week. It's a brand new experience for the old author. Please support me by voting. Chapter 24. You can call me a countryman. I can bear it. There are also various battles to manipulate the timeline, which is almost a mess. What about the celestial god group and the 5 great gods? Anyway, if it is according to the comics, then this world may be gone in the next second. However, for now, Lin Feng's combat power is already top level and fully sufficient for the superheroes and supervillains that will appear in the first phase of Marvel. This relieved Lin Feng's anxiety a little. And it will take many years for Thanos to appear, not to mention Kang the Conqueror. The one he is really worried about now is Ancient One. She has the Time Stone, and it is difficult to hide the changes in the timeline from him. The other is TVA, who also controls the timeline. Lin Feng is afraid that someone from TVA will appear in front of him in the next second and cut him off. That would be too unfair. And during this period of time, the reason why Lin Feng has been so low-key is not that he does not want to attract the attention of both parties. At least he has to hide until he has enough strength. Having just obtained such power, Lin Feng couldn't hold back and started to go out and hang out. Who doesn't have a dream of becoming a superhero? Before, he had only been injected with a super soldier serum, so he didn't dare to go out, but now he didn't have anything to worry about. Even if he was shot, it wouldn't have any effect at all. Lin Feng changed into a black casual outfit, put on a mask, and went out directly. It was still quite dangerous to walk on the streets in the United States at night, but it was nothing for Lin Feng at the moment. After dealing with several waves of hooligans, Lin Feng came to a street corner and saw a woman with a hooded jumpsuit and a graceful figure being stopped in the corner. In front of her was a group of strong men in black suits. They were holding guns in their hands, and they were obviously not ordinary hooligans. The woman's body was torn in many places, revealing bleeding skin. Bang, bang, bang. These people shot directly without hesitation, but what surprised Lin Feng was that the woman seemed to be able to predict the future and could easily dodge every time, but there were so many bullets that she couldn't completely avoid them in the narrow corner, and she was still scratched. Most importantly, Lin Feng found that her thigh was still bleeding, making it almost impossible for her to exert any strength. But then, a device on her wrist shot out spider silk, which swung away directly, avoiding the dense strafing. Spider-Man. Lin Feng was shocked. Isn't this Spider-Man? Oh no, if it was Spider-Man in the 1999 universe, wouldn't he be only 7 or 8 years old? And although the other party was wearing a mask, it was clear from her figure that she was a woman, not Peter Parker. Spider-Woman. Lin Feng's brain was a little out of order. He had already felt that it was outrageous to see Wonder Woman Diana before, and now there was someone who looked like Spider-Woman. He was not sure how chaotic this world was. He was more inclined to believe that this was not a simple 1999 universe, but a Zangman world. But if it was a Zangman world, the danger would be much greater than that of the 1999 universe. But at this time, Lin Feng didn't have time to think too much. No matter who the Spider-Woman in front of him was, he would save her first. Seeing Lin Feng suddenly appear, these men in black were not in a hurry, and they did not ask any questions. They just raised their hands and shot. This proved Lin Feng's previous guess that these men in black were not ordinary gangsters, but more like professional killers. Bang, bang, bang. A burst of dense gunfire came, and Lin Feng's figure was seen shuttling in the rain of bullets. Although he did not have spider sense, as a master of Huajin practicing Chinese martial arts, he already had a considerable degree of danger perception ability. In addition, his physical fitness and insight were far superior to these people at this time, so he easily avoided the rain of bullets. At this time, Lin Feng was not afraid of bullets, but the clothes on his body were just ordinary clothes, and they would be damaged if they were hit. The Spider-Woman, who was originally forced into a corner, was also stunned when she saw the amazing body skills that Lin Feng suddenly showed. The killing method that Lin Feng showed next made her instinctively frightened. When he faced those men in black, he punched them and sent them flying. These men in black fell to the ground, spitting blood and bringing out fragments of their internal organs. Their internal organs were smashed by Lin Feng, and they were about to die. With Lin Feng's current strength, being hit by Lin Feng's fist was no different from being hit by a heavy truck. Simple and neat. In almost a moment, they were all killed. At this time, Lin Feng had time to look at the Spider-Woman who was bleeding in the corner. Various speculations kept flashing in his mind. After all, there seemed to be many characters who were female and had the abilities of Spider-Man. After all, Spider-Man was Marvel's #1 IP, and there were too many Spider-Mans derived from it. Even the Tyrannosaurus Rex could be Spider-Man, even the refrigerator could be Spider-Man, and even the pig could be Spider-Man. Almost nothing was impossible. "Do you need help?" Lin Feng said. "Thank you." A girlish voice came from under the Spider-Woman's mask. She secretly exclaimed in her heart that it was a close call. She was chased here just now and almost died. Fortunately, she met this man in black. Seeing that the other party was wearing a black casual sweater and a mask, it was obvious that he didn't want to show his true face like herself. But she couldn't think of such a street hero suddenly appearing in the vicinity for a while. "I think I can do it," Spider-Woman said. The wounds on her body were gradually healing. Since she had the ability of spiders, her healing ability has also greatly improved. As long as she is not in a desperate state, the general wounds will heal much faster than most people think. "What's your name?" Lin Feng asked immediately after seeing that the other party was fine. You can call me Spider-Woman." Spider-Woman thought about it. She didn't seem to have a formal name yet. Then she thought of a name and said, "What about you?" You can call me Homelander." Lin Feng didn't think about it and directly reported the nickname of Homelander. Who made him just draw the template of Homelander. "Thank you for your help today, but be careful, you may have provoked a very troublesome opponent, Kingpin." Spider-Woman thought about it and decided to remind her lifesaver. "I have disrupted several of his underground transactions recently, so I was ambushed by his men today." Chapter 25, Iron Man's debut. A stone stirs up 1,000 waves. "You helped me today, but you may also become a thorn in his side." Spider-Woman thought about it and decided to remind Lin Feng. "One of his men is called Palladium Eyes, who is very powerful. I was injured by him today." Lin Feng suddenly realized that it was no wonder that with Spider-Woman's strength, she was forced into such a mess by a group of ordinary people. With the ability of spider sense, it was difficult for ordinary people to hit her, but Palladium Eyes was indeed good at it. If she was ambushed, it was possible to seriously injure Spider-Woman. But he didn't expect that Kingpin and Palladium Eyes were both villains in the Spider-Man series. Spider-Man was still a young boy, but Spider-Woman had already faced them. Could it be that there was no Peter Parker in this world? "It doesn't matter, let him come," Lin Feng said indifferently. If it was a powerful supervillain, he would have to be more careful, but Kingpin and Palladium Eyes could only pose a threat to street heroes like Spider-Man and Daredevil. For Lin Feng now, it would not be helpful to have more. "No matter what, thank you today, my countrymen. You saved me once today, and I will save you in the future." After thanking her, Spider-Woman shot out spider silk and left the alley. Lin Feng naturally would not stay for long and left immediately. Not long after, another group of people in black suits, led by a sturdy man wearing a blue-gray jumpsuit and a target painted on his forehead, came to the scene. When he saw the bodies of the black-clothed men on the ground, his face suddenly became very ugly. This was none other than the chief killer of Kingpin, Palladium Eyes, who Lin Feng and Spider-Woman mentioned just now. He was just a moment late, and he had already seen his men's bodies scattered all over the ground. "There are others here." Palladium Eyes immediately judged that these people died under an extremely terrifying power and fierce killing moves, and they were obviously not the same kind of people as the Spider-Woman who had been causing trouble before. he immediately asked people to clean up the bodies here and then returned to Kingpin's underground empire headquarters to report to him about this failure. Lin Feng did not take Kingpin's threat seriously. Kingpin was really no threat to him at the moment. As long as he hid his identity, he was basically fearless. He did not help Spider-Woman to fight Kingpin. After all, the two sides had only met once, and their relationship was not that good yet. In the next few days, Lin Feng fought criminals on the streets of New York, satisfying his little wish of becoming a superhero in his previous life, and adapting to his current strength as soon as possible. After the fusion template, Lin Feng could say that he was no longer a human being. Under Lin Feng's attack, the security environment in the nearby streets was obviously much better. Even the gangs did not dare to hang around nearby and only dared to run far away to carry out activities. He had no intention of chasing them. After all, he was now a third-generation Chinese on the surface, but in fact he was still a Chinese in his bones, and he had no sense of belonging to the United States. Being chivalrous and righteous was not a sense of mission. To be precise, it was more like a temporary novelty. However, in this process, he became famous within 10 days. To be precise, several superheroes emerged in these days. The first one is naturally the most flamboyant Iron Man, Tony Stark. Although he was not kidnapped this time, he still made the Mark armor, which has been photographed by many people in recent days, causing a certain degree of sensation. Although Tony Stark's identity has not been announced, it is only a matter of time before it is exposed. The most famous thing Iron Man did was to fight local terrorists in Afghanistan and rescue many oppressed people. The second one is Spider-Woman, who swings around in the high-rise buildings in New York every day. It can be said that compared with Tony Stark, she is much more diligent. All kinds of major and minor crimes are within her scope of attack. Especially after being ambushed by Kingpin last time, she increased her efforts to disrupt Kingpin's business. For a time, it is said that the emperor of this underground empire was very angry, but there was nothing he could do. The third one is a female warrior wearing ancient armor, Wonder Woman. Although she doesn't take action as often as Spider-Woman, she usually participates in large-scale cases and quickly becomes extremely popular with her beautiful appearance and hot body. The fourth one is Lin Feng's incarnation, the Homelander, who has gradually become famous these days, especially his ruthless approach to those criminals, which is obviously more popular with the lower-class Americans than the so-called no-killing principle of other superheroes. After all, the lower-class Americans are the group most affected by these crimes, while Americans above the middle class can live in physically isolated middle and high-end communities and encounter much less danger. But the lower class people are almost always facing the threat of these criminals, and they wish they would die. Therefore, Lin Feng's incarnation of the Homelander became the nemesis of criminals, and no one dared to commit crimes in the neighborhood where he usually moved around. For a time, he became the object of worship for countless people. Of course, he also became a thorn in the eyes of the authorities. The local police station has issued rewards many times, calling him a murderer. The reason is that, even if he is a criminal, he can only be dealt with by the law, and lynching cannot be used. The lower class people who are familiar with the local situation are even more disdainful. If these laws are useful, these criminals would not have been at large until now. It's just a pity for many people that Homelander seems to be satisfied with being a street hero and has not expanded the scope of his chivalry to the entire New York, let alone the entire United States. It is said that Wonder Woman's action trajectory has even reached the west coast of the United States. In comparison, Homelander is too homely. Lin Feng certainly knows the public's private evaluation of him, but he also knows very well that it is not that he is too homely, but that he knows too much about how deep the water is in this world. The first bird to stick its head out dies quickly. It would be better if it is not the comic world. If it is just the film and television world, he can still cope with it, but if the settings in the comic world are destroyed at any time, even if he has the template of Homelander to support him, it is not enough. At noon that day, just return home, while eating and watching the TV news, Tony Stark announced with high spirits, "The fact is, I'm Iron Man." After saying this famous line in Marvel's many lines, Tony Stark also announced that from today on, the weapons department of Stark Industries will be shut down. A single stone can cause 1,000 waves. Just launched a test push. Please recommend. Please support. Please everything. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.